Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. Welcome. This is the school board briefing, and the time is 2:31 p.m. Sergeant at Arms, has the lobby been cleared? Thank you. Board members, as we begin today's discussions, I just want to remind everyone of our protocol that each board member will have 4 minutes for initial comments and 2 minutes for follow-up comments per the agenda items. I'd like to also remind everyone that today's comments will need to reflect what is on today's agenda. Today's agenda includes quarterly reports for school board advisory committees in the first and second quarter, construction change order report for January 2024, Estero High School athletic facilities and the Village of Estero lease shared use agreements, policy, legal update, public comment, good of the order, and board member comments. We're going to begin with our quarterly reports for school board. I'm changing the list around just because the gentleman who is going to give us these comments needs to leave a little early. So do we have a representative for the Finance Advisory Committee with us today? Thank you.
I'm Ken Boyd, I'm the Vice Chairman.
Is that on? Make sure our microphone is on.
No.
Sorry, just one moment. We will make sure we get this on record.
On now. Okay. Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Ken Boyd. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Finance Committee. I guess this is a first report for the year, or for me anyway. So we had a meeting in September. We elected officers. Viri Ryan was nominated chairperson, and Samantha Bold was elected vice chairman. October meeting, we were presented information on the 24 budget. During the presentation, we had a number of questions regarding student funding allocations, property insurance, employee insurance benefits, student transportation, and the capital plan. I'd probably make a comment that we've been talking about the employee insurance benefits for a number of years, and so we were pretty happy that that was enhanced last year, so that's a really great start. We have some concerns about ongoing funding for competitive salaries and benefits going forward, so those are one of the initiatives that we'd like to start looking at in the next couple meetings. November, Kelly Letcher presented the capital plan for the 24 budget. We had a number of questions. One of them was the rate on the COPS. I'm not sure we got an answer on that, so we'll have to ask about that. I know there are probably varying rates on them. Additionally, we were interested in talking about the district's approach to addressing the issue of teacher salaries and competitive pay for bus drivers, as I mentioned. January meeting, we had a couple visitors from the public, from Alva, with some concerns about where the new school in Alva is being located. They had a number of issues regarding proximity to neighborhoods. They felt it was a little far away from some of the neighborhoods. I was elected the vice chairman in that meeting because the previous vice chairman resigned. And then Dr. Malloy presented an update on the capital plan and the 10-year outlook. I would say that one of the main things we've been talking about in the committee as well is the interest in getting schools closer to neighborhoods. And we've been talking a while about having the developers chip in for some land use to build schools closer. You know, as a personal comment, I think if you look to the future, we're looking toward a future with way fewer cars, which is great. And it just took me half hour to get here, and it was a 5-minute drive normally. So, you know, to the extent we can look at getting schools within these neighborhoods similar to a Babcock Ranch type scenario, I think that would be a really great way to alleviate traffic, these lines, you know, the pickup lines and things of that nature. So that's what I had for the report that Viri put together for me. I don't know if you have questions or comments.
Board members and Superintendent, do you have any questions or comments at this time? Ms. Patrica?
Just comment. When I walked in the board room and saw you here, I was thrilled. You do a really, really good job for us on Finance Advisory, and I also have to point out, I don't remember the year, and I'm hoping that I'm remembering this correctly, but your wife was Nurse of the Year one year.
Oh, yeah, that
she
was
not?
about, 3 or 4 years ago.
And I don't know that I had the opportunity back then to say it publicly, but now that you're standing in front of me, I will congratulate you publicly,
thanks.
which I couldn't do back then because you weren't in the boardroom.
Well, thank you.
So your commitment to the district is not just through your volunteerism, but through your family and your support of her work in our schools, so thank you.
Oh, yeah, thanks very much, appreciate that.
Yes, Ms. Morgan.
And thank you for the report, and thank you for stepping in to your role. I do want to comment that the Finance Advisory Committee has pushed very hard to get the budget amendments put on the district website, and that has been done thanks to Kelly Lecter. So one of their initiatives has been approved and operationalized. So thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Giovanelli.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. I actually would agree with you regarding the more neighborhood schools. However, Lee County is kind of not that, like River Hall, we have the school in River Hall, which is wonderful. I wish we had more collaboration with developers and had more of that, but unfortunately, I don't see it in the cards that much. That takes some more collaboration with the county commissioners and so forth, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it would behoove us. I personally live in Tanglewood, and we have the Tanglewood School, and it's a great community neighborhood school, and I just wish we had more of those. But I thank you for bringing that up because it's important, and maybe we could get some more schools spotty like that, I mean, throughout the county. So, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, we recognize it requires a lot of coordination and with the county commissioners, so that's,
Yeah.
a major issue.
Yeah, but thank you.
All right, seeing no other comments, thank you so much for your time and your service.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have a representative today from the Construction Advisory Committee?
There she is.
Good afternoon. I'm Clarissa Parodi. I'm the chair for the CAC Committee, Construction Advisory Committee. I have a quick report. Although there's a lot going on in construction right now for all of the schools, we had a first meeting in September, and a chairperson was elected, and a new vice chair, Thomas Mayo. And we had a brief I want to thank the attorneys. We had a briefing on the new rules for all the committees, so thank you very much for that. And a board member update on the capital plan. And it was shocking to learn about all the new population in Lee County and all of the seats that are needed for the county. Specifically, the 5 new elementary schools, 4 new middle schools, 2 K-8s, and the rebuilds and high schools. In November, we had revised capital plan. We are still analyzing it, and it's a lot to take in. But we agree that Lee County needs more schools, and that the county needs to be able to remove the relocatables out of the campuses. In the last meeting, we have a very interesting topic that was regarding the project management program and the job order contracting. And Mr. Ross gave us an update on these new programs that the board wants to implement regarding construction. And we are still analyzing them, and we'll be glad to give an input on that. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any
Board
questions?
members, do you have any comments, questions, Superintendent? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have a representative for the Curriculum Advisory Committee today?
Brian DeGrazio, Chair of the Curriculum Committee. All right, so in September, we had our first meeting. Board Attorney Ms. Bruno reviewed the parliamentary procedures and explained the board policies and state legislation that should be considered and implemented during our meetings. We elected a chair and vice chair, of course, myself the chair, and our vice chair, Mr. Eric Griffiths. October 30th was our second meeting. The committee received information from the curriculum directors on media legislation and the district's response and actions to date to meet the legislative requirements. The committee engaged in discussion protocol to determine which topics were of the highest priority for their work this year. The committee determined their first topic would be missed learning due to COVID and Hurricane Ian, and received the district's plan to accelerate learning so the students are on target for graduation. Board member Patrica reported on the district's plan to improve busing and shared how the board has been working to update policies and meet new legislative requirements. On the 27th, we were unable to have our meeting due to a lack of quorum. Thank you, board, for allowing us to go hybrid. It's pretty important now, especially with traffic. It's a big county. It's tough to get everyone together sometimes. January 29th, we did meet quorum and adopted a hybrid meeting. Also, we focused on the topic of missed learning, intervention and acceleration opportunities. The curriculum directors presented information on adjustments to scope and sequence and assessments, gave information on targeted interventions, drill down plans, and spiral review to support learning gaps due to the hurricane. In addition, progress monitoring 2 data was reviewed in comparison to state data. The committee wants to explore the resiliency opportunities offered for students during missed learning. That may happen at a future meeting. The next meeting will be tackling social studies adoptions and changes or approval of media access form. The committee, let's see, and school board member Patrica encouraged members to view the accountability presentation on the 23rd. And that's it so far. On a side note, I just want to thank you and appreciate this opportunity, and certainly encourage you to keep our schools and curriculum as politically neutral as we can going forward. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
All right.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Do we have a representative for the District Advisory Council with us today?
Good afternoon. Gabe Denning, the chairman of the District Advisory Council. We've had 3 meetings in the first quarter, September, October, and November. And the first one I was like to chair, which was great. I'm happy to stand before you today and help represent the folks that we're seeing. We adopted a virtual model. There was a lot of discussion about it, a lot of back and forth. Some people definitely believe in the necessity for in-person meetings. And while I understand that, and just as the previous gentleman mentioned, it's a huge district. I work fully remote. We can do remote just fine, and with that, we've seen a lot of participation. We're meeting we're meeting quorum every time we get together, which is important. And at one meeting, I think we had 96 folks dialed in. We had quite a few members of the public as well. So, with all the downsides of not being able to physically be with somebody, read that body language, see how people are seeing or maybe feeling, it is far superior when it comes to total involvement of the community to have that virtual option. So I'll be, as long as I get to serve on the board, I'll be pushing for that pretty hard. So first meeting, is basically who wants to be chairman in each committee. And Ms. Giovanelli mentioned that, give her speech on it, but other than that, not too much substantive to report. For the DAC meeting in October, we had a briefing on the purpose and function of the SAC, which is obviously needed because it seems like there's a disparate participation across the district in elementary, middle, and high school levels as far as whether or not there is a SAC, how involved those folks are, and what kind of outreach is happening. You can only do so much with parents. I understand that. I'm a parent myself. I'm not an administrator, and I know everyone's doing the best they can to get that participation, but it continues to be a challenge, and it's definitely disparate across the district. The other thing in October, we polled each of the DAC members to see what they would like to discuss, pending any inputs from you all that you'd like to hear from us. One of the biggest things that came up was transportation. It continues to be a huge concern. I don't need to tell you all any more than that because you're far more intelligent on it than I am, but it remains to be a major concern for everyone on the SAC. You have students getting to school very late and getting home much later, and as we look forward to high school starting later, which ultimately is better because you have kids going to school way too early before before most research has shown that teenagers can effectively learn. They're showing up at 6:40 in the morning and earlier. Unfortunately, there is a deadline that the state has set, and I don't know that transportation is there, and that has come up in every DAC meeting so far, which is why I feel like compelled to share that here. Finally, in November, we had our last meeting of the quarter due to the winter holidays. There was a briefing on the middle school proximity plan, generally well received from all. I think it was a testimony to the efforts of this board and all the members of the district to how well the elementary proximity plan went, all things considered, change management being what it is. I think that was very well done and well received, and people are excited to see the changes and what they ultimately can do for all the students of Lee County, you know, with notable exceptions of folks who were like, well, I got to move to this school versus that school, but really those were the only levels of concerns that were there. With that, that's what we did in the first quarter. We're looking forward to the second quarter here, and I'm happy to serve as at your leisure. So thank you so much.
All right, board members and superintendent, do you have any questions or comments?
Just want to thank you very specifically for the input on transportation. To the board members, to the community, and other people who may be watching, the Transportation Task Force is underway. Started before the holiday. They had their meeting following the winter break. Their follow-up meeting is coming this coming Wednesday, and they're actually heading out to one of the bus transportation yards. So there are people who work logistics in our community that are helping better understand, and what the hope is that the hope and the plan is to receive 4 to 8 recommendations from the task force as to how we can plan and approach transportation. Elementary proximity was stage 1, middle school is stage 2. Both of those are reducing miles and should help us continue to get buses more on time. Been sharing with all of you the metric of on-time percentage in the morning, which is getting better. Our afternoon is still our afternoons, and we have good weather right now. All it's going to take is an afternoon thunderstorm, and that'll get middle schoolers home around 8 o'clock at night. So we continue to work, continue to move forward, and since it was mentioned, the deadline and the approach for the flip of the schedule with high schools starting after 8:30 in the morning, I believe, is the requirement, after 8, and middle school's not starting before 8, well, the flip. I don't want to try to get it read wrong into the record, but high school's going later. That's not in the plans until 2026, so the fall of 26. So we have one more year in my mind for us to begin to work with our transportation system now to get that right, and then begin the process of figuring out how we're going to make that transition so that all of our elementary, middle, and high schools in 2026 are able to start on time. It's just consistent every time I say this. If there's anybody listening who would like to drive a bus, we are still about 75 bus drivers short. Elementary proximity will reduce, middle school proximity will reduce some of the required routes. We still need all the bus drivers we have, and we'd like to fill in those 75 that are currently empty. We know that even moving into the proximity changes, we can keep all those individuals gainfully employed and moving our students about the community. And it would be helpful if we had bus drivers in reserve, so if somebody was absent or out or on Family Medical Leave Act, we'd have somebody to step in and handle those situations. Thank you for continuing to point that out to us. It's an area where we've got to continue to improve.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You all as well.
We
Thank you.
appreciate you. Okay, moving along, do we have a representative this afternoon for Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee?
Good afternoon, Chris Blakely, the chairperson for the Equity Diversity Advisory Committee. And our report is as follows. September 2023, the Equity Diversity Advisory Committee met with quorum on September 11th, where School Board Attorney and General Counsel, Ms. Kathy Dupree Bruno, called for the election of chair and vice chair. Myself and Dr. Paula Porter were elected unanimously as chair and vice chair respectively. Additionally, our school board attorney and general counsel provided update about board policy and parliamentary procedure. Dr. Adam Malloy, our director of planning, growth, and capacity, provided updates regarding enrollment and capacity. The EDAC committee held selection of representatives for the site selection committee. EDAC committee members Rashika Fuller, Stephanie House, and Vanessa Chavino were selected as representatives to the site selection committee, and Mr. Carl Baxter was selected as an alternate. Our School Board Liaison Debbie Jordan provided updates about the new communications chief. Our staff liaison Jared Eady provided updates regarding scheduling topics of interest for the year after October's meeting about middle school proximity. In October, we met on October 9th, where Dr. Adam Malloy provided an overview of the considerations for the middle school proximity plan. Committee members offered feedback, and Dr. Malloy would provide proposed maps and updates during November's meeting. Our school board liaison provided updates about the advisory committee meeting modalities and upcoming presentations about proximity. And our staff liaison provided updates regarding scheduling topics of interest for the year. As a committee, we did move to a modality of in-person with the option for Zoom or Teams due to extenuating circumstances, and that was decided by the committee. The committee made a formal recommendation to the board to consider an exception to the current committee's attendance policy to allow for exception of an absence due to extenuating circumstance. There was some discussion related to the September absence of committee members due to the delay in notice of their committee appointments, and then the scheduled time of that meeting, and caused some schedule conflicts. So there was a formal recommendation made to the board. In November, the committee met to discuss our virtual presentation with Dr. Beloy, and we offered strategies to better communicate and release of the middle school proximity plan. The committee shared concerns regarding the potential segregation due to community makeup with the proximity schools. Addition to the presentation, we participated in an activity which we do annually to identify topics of interest to present to the committee throughout the academic calendar. What was sent out prior to the meeting was a Google form, and on this form, the committee members had the ability to provide 2 topics of interest for the 23-24 year. For example, those topics could have been proximity plan, community engagement, the communication plan, recruitment and retention of staff, restorative practices, and positive prevention. Once all committee members completed the survey, the topics of interest would be grouped by affinities for final selection. Affinity grouping involves sorting topics based on themes. So those topics of interest were placed on chart paper in our November meeting, and each member were provided with 3 stickers with their initials to place on the topics they were most interested in learning about to create a bank of committee topics for the calendar year. Topics were tallied after each committee member was given the opportunity to select topics, and the topics of interest selected for the balance of the year. In January, we were looking to receive presentation related to legislation and governmental impacts as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In February, we had presentation regarding student conduct, as well as our non-discrimination policy, Title VI, Title VII, and Title IX investigation process. We will discuss recruitment and board recommendations in our April meeting. There was also discussion during the good of the order regarding new books for elementary classroom libraries, and a committee member wanted to take the opportunity to recognize the chair, board liaison, school board liaison, and the DEI office for all the work they have been doing this year and previously. In our January meeting, we met and received updates from Angel Gomez, Chief Communications and Government Relations Liaison, and provided information about the 24 legislative session and future proposals made on behalf of the Lee County School District. The school board liaison provided information regarding upcoming conversations on the proximity plan, the legislative plans, and Bayshore Elementary School. And our district liaison updates regarding the meeting schedule with Chuck Bradley to cover February and March topics. And then we met in February, and our drafted minutes will be voted on in our March meeting. And that will conclude our Q1 and Q2 report.
All right, thank you so much. Board members, Superintendent, do you have any questions or comments? Ms. Jordan.
I just want to thank Dr. Blakely for, this is his 2nd year, maybe 3rd, being the chair, and you continue to keep everybody together, and I really do appreciate the robust conversations that we always have in that, because it is my 2nd time serving this committee, so I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your support.
All right, thank you so much. And the last one we have is Strategic Planning and Accountability Advisory Committee. Do we have a representative here today?
I appreciate Chris pulling that back down. Good afternoon, board members and Superintendent Bernier. I'm Michelle Stork, and I am the chair of the Strategic Planning and Accountability Advisory Committee. Since our last update to the board, the CSI Advisory Committee officially became Strategic Planning and Accountability Advisory Committee, otherwise known as SPA. At our first meeting of the year in September, we received the procedural training, elected officers, and established our meeting schedule for the year. Additionally, we reviewed the newly refreshed district strategic plan. In our October meeting, we reviewed data from the strategic plan, as well as the strategic priorities, objectives, and KPIs to consider our committee priorities for this year. We utilized a quality tools activity to identify the most critical priorities based on the performance data. As a result of the activity, the committee selected key areas of focus in the district's strategic plan to examine more deeply, and those were Objective 5 and Objective 6. For Objective 5, which is for the district to promote a safe learning and working environment, our first staff presentation was from Dr. Jessica Duncan and Tammy Scott from the District Student Services Department. They presented information about student discipline and SESAR incidents, which are defined by the state to be serious incidents of student crime, violence, and disruption, and to review trends in our schools over the last few years and what types of strategies the district is deploying to address the trends. The committee had some discussion, but felt a deeper dive was necessary before making any recommendations to the board, so the Student Services team is coming back to our meeting tomorrow for a follow-up presentation. In January, the committee received the presentation on Objective 6, which is to increase employee recruitment and retention. For that presentation, a consultant hired by the school district, Ms. Hillary McLean, presented the Human Resource Division outcomes and also the primary strategy, which was an organizational redesign of not only the HR division, but also a major technology project, the PeopleSoft Enterprise Update. The committee had many questions about this very large scope of change in a short period of time and the need for change management, both on the technology side, but also on the process and human side of the equation. The committee did not see or hear a level of detail in the plan that allowed for formal recommendations to be made, so the committee did make a motion to ask for a more detailed project plan for the HR transformation, with more of a focus on the people and processes that require re-engineering and less on the technology, to better understand how the district intends to achieve the transformation in such an expedited timeline. Additionally, what ongoing support will be offered to reinforce this ambitious organizational change management, and how does the district intend to measure the success or impact of the strategy. While the committee has made 2 advisory motions so far this year, the one that I just read to you, but also the first motion the committee made was to rekindle a previously made suggestion by the board advisory to look into the opportunity for businesses to be able to voluntarily sign up their staff members to serve as substitute teachers as a function of a partnership. I'm aware that this recommendation was already shared directly with the board by Board Chair Fisher at a prior board meeting, but I wanted to be sure we shared it as well during our formal update. We as a committee decided that we would prefer to have a more in-depth review and discussion before making recommendations to the board. So after these reviews, we do anticipate making some additional recommendations at that time. As I mentioned, our next board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow evening. And finally, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank Dr. Savage for his assistance with facilitating the good work of our committee, and for Chair Fisher for his contributions as well.
Excellent, thank you. Board members, superintendent, yes, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Stork. I do want to let you know that just the prior workshop, I did read the motion you had described in there, and I will have a follow-up once I talk to administration about that. So just want to say thank you for running some great meetings, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Have a great afternoon. All right, next on the agenda for today is the construction change order report for 2024. January 2024, we welcome Frederick Ross, Executive Director, Operational Planning and Project Management.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Bernier, Dr. Pei Bruno. This is your January 2024 change order report. The very first page, you can see a recap. We provided direct material purchases in the amount of $1,682,119.51. The tax savings returned back to the district was $96,571.10. Non-direct material purchase change orders equated to $88,430.67. That is a credit coming back from Value Engineering for the amount of $88,430.67. Contingencies adjustments this month were $424,928.83. No return of contingency this month. If you go to the following backup page, it gives a breakout of all the various projects. We had 3 DMPs this month that we are reporting, direct material purchases. We had 4 change order proppers. One was a DMP reconciliation. The other was a no-cost time extension on a project. And the other was a VE, which I just mentioned, the $88,000 VE deduction change order. We had 11 contingency adjustments. Part of the adjustments were for expediting our projects. We're having to provide expedition money for generators, long-term construction materials, fire pumps, switch gear. So those contingency adjustments, which are embedded in the total project cost you approve, we utilize some of those funds for that, and we had 11 contingencies. Are there any questions?
Board members, do you have any questions? Superintendent, do you have any comments or questions? All right, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
If I may, Superintendent? Next month, we'll be bringing a changeover report where we returned with DMP savings and deductive change orders for the cost of construction, $7.4 million back to the district. So you'll see that next month.
I was just going to clap. I'm glad you.
That's not me, that was the team effort, but thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Estero High School athletic facilities and the Village of Estero lease shared use agreements. We welcome to the podium Dr. Adam Malloy, Director of Planning, Growth, and Capacity.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may, to set Dr. Malloy up, this is an ongoing project and idea that was brought forth by the Village of Estero regarding specifically the athletic facilities for Estero High School. While the Village of Estero has moved forward in its plans in talking about this, I want the board members and the community to understand this would really be the first opportunity, other than in private one-on-ones, for us to discuss this issue. Clearly, it's still an open issue for this board, and it would take board action before we could enter into any agreements with the Village of Estero and to our larger community, so they understand it will take board action in order to move forward with any of these ideas. Dr. Malloy's presence here today is to give us one of the first looks at what this potentially could look like for our high school and its athletic facilities, and to certainly entertain your questions and comments as it relates to this specific project. Dr. Malloy.
Thank you and good afternoon. Today I'm pleased to present a collaborative effort between our school district and the Village of Estero. Over several months we've worked diligently to establish agreements for a shared sports complex on the current site of Estero High School's athletic fields. This initiative highlights our commitment to maximizing resources and enhancing athletic opportunities for both Estero High School students and the broader community. The following slides will outline the details of the athletic facilities lease, the Village of Estero's capital commitment to the complex's development and maintenance, and the shared use agreement that prioritizes Estero High School athletics. The agenda focuses on 4 key aspects of the Estero Athletic Facilities project. The background section provides context outlining the need and motivation behind the shared sports complex development. We'll then discuss the key documents, including lease and shared use agreements, highlighting significant terms and conditions. Next, we'll examine some precedents from similar projects in Lee County, reinforcing the feasibility and benefits of our initiative. Finally, we'll review the decision analysis process, evaluating factors like cost benefit and community impact that guided our pursuit of the project. For background, the Village of Estero has expressed a keen interest in revitalizing the Estero High School athletic facilities, aiming to transform them into a vibrant community sportsplex, representing a best in class for, both for the district as well as the community members in Estero. Throughout negotiations, the primary focus has been on how to balance the needs of Estero High School athletics with the village's desire to provide recreational space for the broader community. As a result, the Village of Estero has committed to both developing and maintaining the athletic facilities with a firm agreement in place to ensure that Estero High sports programs receive guaranteed priority access. This collaboration underscores a shared commitment to enhancing athletic opportunities for both the school and the wider Estero community, while recognizing the importance of preserving recreational spaces for our residents. Slide 4 reviews some macro-level aspects of the lease with the Village of Estero. The lease with the Village of Estero entails a 99-year agreement with a base rent set at $10. The Village of Estero assumes responsibility for the capital costs associated with all improvements, as well as the ongoing management and maintenance of the facilities. Additionally, the village has a requirement to contribute $10 million toward modernization and expansion efforts for Estero High School in the first 5 years of the lease, an expectation to have the football field enhanced and completed this summer with bidding already underway. Through collaborative efforts, both the school district and the village will work together to ensure that the construction timeline aligns with the prioritization of Estero High School's athletic schedule. Slide 5 provides an overview of the shared use agreement, which governs the use and priority of Estero High School athletics. This agreement ensures that Estero High School's interscholastic athletic programs have priority access to the facilities. Additionally, it grants village residents access to recreational amenities when the facilities are not in use for school events. As part of the agreement, the village has committed again to significant improvement obligations over the initial 5 years, investing a minimum of $10 million into facility enhancements. These enhancements include installing turf on the football field, renovating the tennis courts, and upgrading the 2 basketball courts. This collaborative effort aims to optimize facility usage for both educational and community purposes, enhancing opportunities for athletic engagement and recreational enjoyment. The latest rendering presents an innovative design concept for the shared athletic facilities, depicting a distinctive community sportsplex equipped with multiple fields: football, soccer, lacrosse, baseball, etc. This is for use by both Estero High School and the wider community. Notably, the rendering illustrates the boundary with the school positioned at the bottom, which will be demarcated by a perimeter fence. This fence will ensure controlled access to the school and complex during designated hours and times. The scale and intensity of the development have been carefully orchestrated to accommodate Estero High School's athletic schedules seamlessly. Numerous meetings have been convened to comprehensively address project logistics, including coordination between the school, village, athletics, planning, legal, and other pertinent stakeholders. Slide 7 provides an overview of shared facility precedents within the school district. These precedents encompass a range of agreements, including interlocal agreements or ILAs, memorandum of understandings, MOUs, shared use agreements, and leases with various entities and stakeholders across Lee County. The planning department does oversee these agreements in collaboration with departments across the central office. Regarding specifically the agreements with the Village of Estero, particular attention was given to ensuring the school district's protection through mechanisms like indemnification, termination clauses, and contingency planning for various scenarios. In terms of remedial action, if the village fails to fulfill obligations, the board may undertake necessary work, billing the village for costs incurred. This is generally considered self-help remedies protecting the district. In terms of non-compliance, the board may perform necessary work in case of village default, billing the village accordingly. Right to terminate would be potential for failure to comply and not fulfilling obligations of the lease. This slide presents a list of opportunities related to the shared use project with the Village of Estero. The project offers numerous benefits, beginning with the introduction of modern recreational facilities aimed at improving the overall quality of life for both residents and students. It exemplifies the strength of community collaboration as both the school district and the Village of Estero have jointly worked to ensure that the project meets the needs and aspirations of the local community. Additionally, the initiative is anticipated to yield substantial cost savings through shared resources and efficient facility utilization. Specifically tailored to support Estero High School athletics, the project underscores the commitment to providing high-quality athletic opportunities for students. Notably, challenges and considerations are not listed here as the legal documents address most potential issues, with remaining hypothetical scenarios primarily centered around trust and collaboration. The school district owns the land, while the Village of Estero will finance and maintain the redevelopment of the parcel into a community sportsplex, with Estero High School receiving priority access for all athletic activities. I would now like to turn the presentation over to the superintendent and board for comments and questions.
The only comments I have to offer is first thank you to Dr. Malloy that with everything else he's already doing with the capital plan and helping the maintenance and operations division and construction divisions, middle school proximity, he's found the time to be involved in this project as well. He talks about agreements that are complete. We have agreements that are in draft. They're not necessarily complete at this point, but it's really an opportunity for us to look creatively with our community to increase the ability for Estero High School to have first-class facilities while at the same time provide for the Estero community a place to recreate that primarily, as he stated, we still own, and yet we can utilize as the right of first refusal. So they really are our fields and our chance to really do some amazing things, but also an opportunity for the community also to get its needed green space as they look towards a different future for the Estero community. So very interested in your comments, questions, and Dr. Malloy and I would stand ready to answer anything we possibly can or to get back with you with any further clarifications.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Persons.
This is just a classic win-win. So, especially when it said renovation of the tennis courts. You had me right there. But no, I think it's a great idea for both the community and for the school district. Saves us a lot of money on maintenance of some top-notch facilities.
Ms. Patrica.
Thank you. My one concern is Estero High School's interscholastic athletic programs have priority of use. I'm wondering if we could expand that to include other area high schools or schools. You talked about hypothetical scenarios, Dr. Malloy. What if we have a hurricane and Bonita Springs High School field is rendered unusable? Where are they going to play? Logically, at Estero High School. But if we don't have that written into the agreement where other facilities can use, other schools can use the facility, should an emergency arise or should the need arise, then they can say no. So I'm wondering if we couldn't think about that.
We certainly can bring that sort of amendment forward and have a discussion about it with the Village of Estero.
And then you mentioned indemnities, but I'm sure that legal is all over this, concerned about liability for work done by another entity. Where do we stand in terms of that, please?
Yeah, I'll have to work with legal to get your response to that.
Otherwise, I agree with Mr. Persons. Win-win all around. My final comment will be a concern about equity. And I understand that we have this, we have MOUs or ILAs for facilities in other parts of the county, but this really is going to be amazing. And it's not available to every kid in our county. So the whole purpose of creating the initiative in the Village of Estero was to get the municipal government involved with the school district to improve facilities and educational outcomes, not just for kids, but for the people who live in that municipality. And the point was to scale it up and eventually get it in all parts of the county because of whatever reasons, that kind of fell through, but this is moving forward. And I wonder about the fairness to students in other parts of the county. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Giovanelli?
First of all, do we have anything like this in our district that would compare to this?
I think the closest thing we would have would be Lexington Middle.
Not really. It's one building.
Specifically, it was, well, Lexington was built as a joint use project, which added the community center, which created that big giant gym. Due to Hurricane Ian, we had to replace the entire floor. But I think there are some other unique experiences. You know, you have Bayshore with its ILAs with soccer fields. So there's always been sort of partnerships throughout our district where the physical facility and these types of improvements can be made. But this is certainly probably the largest upgrade to any type of facilities, athletic facilities we've ever attempted to enter into an agreement with.
Right. That's what I thought too. So, I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add on to Dr. Bernier's comments. So our biggest, I guess, ILA partner would typically be the county. And I think the major difference, so he mentioned Lexington, we have Veterans Park. There's agreements at a lot of our schools in terms of shared use and shared cost. The unique nature of this one is the large capital investment by the municipality. And to Ms. Patrica's comment, that certainly opens the door, and the school district is a willing partner for any other municipality if they were interested in putting the capital dollars for shared use. So I think that's really the unique part. But yes, we do with the county, we do have a lot of ILAs that share the cost of the I guess the development and maintenance.
So, thank you. I think the complexity of this is like Dr. Bernier said, it's probably going to be the biggest facility that we have. I see this as like an event center where there would be like sports competitions and sporting events and athletic rentals. Now, who gets the revenue for that? Would that fall under the school district, or would that fall under the Estero?
So the Village of Estero, in the draft agreements that we have, would be able to access, I guess, the capital from those events. Now we are outside of any of the fees that would be charged for the use based on the school district status. But you are correct. They would be able to generate revenue out of the events based on the leasing of the property.
Right. So that's what I thought, because I've gone to a few cheerleading competitions, and I see this in the, and maybe in the future. But anyways, the other question, and Ms. Patrica brought it up, but regarding, she mentioned the liability, but I was thinking on the safety side, then like how do we separate that off from our school if there's an activity, is that going to be, where does that fall under? Is our responsibility for safety, or is it our safety is just during school during the school activity? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, and that was a major priority in the draft process is really that fencing, the demarcation with the perimeter fence has to be step one so that they can block the sportsplex from where students will be during school hours.
Right.
And really that's very specific in the draft language that has to be separated, both the community from the students when they are using it for school activities. So in the renderings you'll see kind of two perimeter fences that are going to be used to, I guess, to separate and to ensure the safety and security, because that was a big, in talking with other administrators and districts that have done things like that was key, and that collaboration to make sure that was secure at different times was a key piece of personnel collaborating within the school and then within the municipality.
Right. Thank you. One more question. So back to the revenue. What if the school district decided to have some kind of competition annually there and wanted to, just a track competition, for example, or a baseball one or whatever? Would we be able to have those revenues, back to the school district, or, that specific fundraiser for whatever means?
Correct, yeah. So think of like a high school football game, which generates a lot of revenue that still maintains as part of the school.
Great. Thank you so much. I love it.
Ms. Jordan.
Thank you. Along with what Ms. Giovanelli was saying, so the Facilitron is managed by whom? Us or the Lee County?
Us.
us. So we are actually the ones who are booking these events
Through Facilitron, yeah.
yeah. So how then do we send them the information saying that, okay, XYZ wants to rent this, now we submit it, and I'm doing this as events in my head, so now I'm going to forward this to you, now you are now that person, and I'm going to require you to have insurance that will cover not only them, but us as well as like riders, putting that, or amendments on that. So that's one thing, how does that work?
The Facilitron and the scheduling piece, or the Facilitron
Yeah,
and the...
Facilitron and us saying, because right now we have Facilitron, and a lot of times if someone comes on and they want to put something on Facilitron and they said no, well, the next person can go, well, you know what, I think I'm going to let you do it. I'm going to make a judgment call and change that. So now you have, how does that work? Because it happens it does happen.
Yeah, I think
right now.
Facilitron will take on kind of like it will be a little unique in terms of the scheduling and availability of the Estero High School facilities, because they'll be a little bit more in use. And they'll still be, under the same requirements that Facilitron normally is. And then we'll also, any sort of written agreement has to be double checked by both school district and the village. So we can certainly look into how those would be reviewed and approved, and what the specific requirements are for, I guess, their insurance and liability.
And then, yeah, because if we have a double book in that, it would not be good either, just saying.
So Dr. Malloy, correct me where I get this wrong, because I may, but you and I have had a number of discussions about this. I think the most important thing to tell the board and the community is the first thing that would be collected is all of the athletic schedules and needs for Estero High School. Those would be placed in Facilitron. That's not normally done in our high schools for each event, but that would be placed, since this is a joint use agreement, those would be placed in Facilitron in order to hold on to these particular periods of time and these particular pieces of these athletic fields, so that they are available for our students and our use. To Ms. Giovanelli's idea, if Estero wants to run a baseball tournament, yes, they could use the baseball field to run that tournament. That would also go into Facilitron. Other people approaching the village of Estero looking to use the fields when not in use, they would still have to interact with us, so we could schedule it in Facilitron so that we know who's using them when, to avoid some of those conflicts.
Okay.
That might help a little bit more. Dr. Malloy, I hope I didn't overspeak.
Way more concise, I think, than what I was saying.
Well, because I know, like, my grandsons play over there, the Estero Mustangs. So it's like, okay, so you have these kids that are all over the fields over there, and then other people as well. And then even with the funding, when the 99 years, and if the X amount of millions of dollars that they're going to be putting into that, if they run out of money and they do not have that money, I know they just put a brand new sign on Three Oaks, but if they don't have the funds for that, then we go after them for the funds. In the meantime, we then are responsible for the maintenance of that until such time that we can get that money, or they go to the village, the residents, the community, and say, here, we're going to raise whatever to meet those.
Dr. Malloy, can you speak to the board about some of the actions that have been taken down in the village of Estero in order for them to secure the funding, specifically even also their bond, if you're eligible to talk about that?
So it's actually just a straight budget item, and that commitment of $10 million in the first 5 years was approved at the village meeting, I believe, January 24th of this year. Really, the protection for the district is that if anything in the lease is terminated, so like let's say a hypothetical, like you mentioned, down the road, leadership change or funds, if that changes, any remediation that we have to do to return to use, we charge the village, and legally through the documents in draft form now, they are responsible to pay for the remediation of that. So really what we wanted to protect was those what-if scenarios, and what they wanted to protect through the 99-year lease was their capital investment. And so that's where we had to go back and forth a number of times just to make sure that both sides, had recognition of what was happening, which we all thought was as Mr. Persons mentioned, a win-win. But there were so many different things that we had to look into in terms of protection.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Ms. Patrica?
Two more things, super quickly. In terms of scheduling, how do we know when we're going to have a home playoff game? How does Estero know that? We don't know going into the season. It's not scheduled. I assume you've addressed that
you would address that by knowing that that's when home playoff games are eligible. It's a lot like renting a facility for some professional sports team that may go into the playoffs. Those dates are already reserved in their calendar and only are made available once they know what their playoff schedule is.
Okay, and then my last question is, can we just do a super quick search on the safety of turf fields? It's my understanding that the NFL has moved away from turf fields and moved toward that fake dirt stuff. I don't know what it's called, but thank you. Because turf fields are causing such significant injuries to knees and ankles.
The turf field that we currently have in Fort Myers is state of the art. It's the same type of turf that the NFL will and does play on. The former turf fields, which turned into concrete, are not what we're suggesting here. They will be state of the art fields. And there's a requirement for something called a bounce test with a field. Every so often you have to drop a very specific weight inside of their measurements to determine whether there's the right amount of flexibility in given the field, which is why in the Fort Myers project we were so focused on the continual maintenance of a field like that. In this particular case, the Village of Estero will take on that maintenance cost, whereas Fort Myers High School has to find a way to continue that maintenance project on their own.
And my last question, we get to keep the name of the field or the stadium?
That's Jeff Summer?
Correct.
Correct. It'll actually be in the rendering in the draft document. Awesome. It has it in 2 places on the turf field.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I will go ahead and go. I don't have any questions, but I have comments. Having athletes at home, I am incredibly excited for our county to have something like this. I know our neighboring counties do, and it's not everywhere in the county. So being a mom that has to travel to sports, my kids get really excited when they get to go to the specific park in one of the close counties. And I feel like this is going to be the same for us, and I could see something like this even in the north part of our county, something similar for those folks. So great point, Ms. Satrika, about making sure that with the equity piece. But thank you so much. No other questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Malloy. Next item on the agenda is public, nope, excuse me, one more thing. Next item on the agenda, we welcome Kathy DePay Bruno, School Board Attorney and General Counsel, Corey Huffman, Assistant School Board Attorney, to give us policy legal update.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Bernier. In December, the board requested that either a policy be created or amended to solidify the expectation from the district's Civil Rights and Equity Guide's requirement that classrooms be viewpoint neutral. The board has pre-briefed, had its first reading, and moved 4 policies to second reading that would address viewpoint neutrality in the classroom, namely an update to the definition section of board bylaws, an update to the pre-existing political activities policy, an update to the pre-existing use of personal property policy, and a new policy to address controversial issues in the classroom. A request was made that the legalities of these policies be explained for the benefit of the public prior to the second reading public hearing, which brings Attorney Huffman and I here today. The legalities are complex and are interwoven among various issues and bodies of law, and Attorney Huffman and I cannot be exhaustive in this presentation, but we will do our best to explain, hopefully in a digestible way, some of the key legal elements that align with the policies.
The agenda today will focus on the proposed policies that I will go over in the next slide. We will briefly address how policies are drafted. We will discuss a more in-depth look at the language and the proposed policies. Also, we will go into the concept of district speech, and then we look forward to your comments and will avail ourselves to any questions you may have. The board has broad latitude in creating policies. That comes from Florida Statute 1001.32 subsection 2, which states that in accordance with the provisions of the state constitution, district school boards shall operate, control, and supervise all free public schools in their respective districts and may exercise any power except that which is expressly prohibited by the state constitution or general law. In addition, Florida statute states that school boards may adopt policies and procedures necessary for the management of all personnel of the school system. The board here has a policy book that is broken down by chapter. As you can see here, there are 10 books that the board has in our policy book. The policies are numbered based on the chapter that it belongs to. So you will note that some of our policies may have separate but mirrored policies in multiple books, like our political activities policy. The policies here start with the bylaws of the board. We have the section 1000 for administration, 2000 for our programs, 3000 as it relates to instructional staff, 4000 as it relates to support staff, and 5000 for students. We also look at 6000 for finances, 7000 for property, 8,000 for operations, and 9,000 for community relations. Policies that have a statutory reference will have those references added to the policies. However, some policies may be created or adopted based on case law or other analyses that are at play, and you will not see a statutory reference in those policies. The policies that we will be focusing on today specifically are 100 as it relates to definitions, political activities, which as I mentioned earlier, you will find in our 1000, 3000, and 4000 books. Use of employees' personal property at school, again in our 1000s, 3000s, and 4000 book. And controversial issues, which is found in our program section, and that's policy 2240. The policies were amended or created to further discuss that classrooms should be viewpoint neutral as requested by the board. You will note that we will be reading policies word for word because it is important that the public know the actual content of these policies.
As this presentation is for the benefit of the public, there will be key terms and concepts that the board and some members of the public may be familiar with. However, in order for this presentation to have its full benefit, we ask your indulgence as we review some basic concepts for public clarity, and you can see how the puzzle pieces fit together. The school board is created by the Florida Constitution and is a political subdivision of the state, and thus it is a government entity. The school board has multiple functions that sometimes finds itself in an executive role, sometimes in a quasi-judicial role, and at times in a legislative role. As the county and city create ordinances, the school board creates policies to provide for the operation, control, and supervision of the school district. When there are new or updated federal and state laws, a change in the legal landscape, or a request to strengthen and clarify, the school board will adopt policies to reflect those changes, which can occur throughout the year. Policy considerations are primarily based on law. It is important to note, however, that the law is multifaceted, intricate, and complex. The United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. There is also the Florida State Constitution, which governs the state. At both the federal level and the state level, you have three branches that create laws. The legislative branch creates statutes. The executive branch enforces and provides ways to effectuate the statutes by creating rules and regulations. And the judicial branch interprets the laws, with the appellate courts providing case law, which are sometimes precedent on how a particular law should be applied to a particular set of facts, often called a legal test. Similar to your doctor who is reviewing the latest study or the American Journal of Medicine to find the latest treatment options for an illness, legal monitors legal trends, the legal landscapes, legal interpretation, and finds legal best practices. The legal department reviews laws, case law, rules, regulations. We have tools such as Westlaw and Neola to assist. We are also connected with other school board attorneys from across the state and nationally for continued dialogue on various laws and their impacts on our clients. The statutes, case law, rules, regulations, legal tools, and conversations with colleagues form the basis of our examination of legal sufficiency for board policies.
In addition to the big umbrella of law that Kathy discussed, we also look to see how our other policies impact each other. We also look to historical context, prior guidance, and our traditional practices and processes that are already in effect. For example, regarding these 4 policies, we looked at our current policies, current practices, federal law, and state law to include regulations and state standards. When there are policies that affect our staff, we also look to review the collective bargaining agreement. And there are 2 provisions that we noticed in the collective bargaining agreement that went to the question that was posed for the modifications to the policies that are being presented to the board. The first being that in Article 1, which is the definition of workplace. The definition of workplace in Article 1 of the collective bargaining agreement is defined as the site for the performance of work done in connection with the duties of the employee of the school board of Lee County. That term includes any place where the work of the school district is performed, including a building or other school premises. Any school-owned vehicle or other school-approved vehicle that is used to transport students to and from school or school activities, and off-school property during any school-sponsored or school-approved activity, event, or function, such as a field trip, workshop, or athletic event. The workplace does not include duty-free time at conventions or workshops at which students are not present. We also looked at Article 2, where there's personal and academic freedom. Each employee's citizenship right to exercise or support their political preference on their own time and away from school premises shall not be impeded, providing such activities do not violate any state or federal ordinance or law. It is the intent of the district that employees shall have academic freedom, which outlines within the outlines of the course content and the curriculum adopted by the board. We looked at these 2 things from the collective bargaining agreement because we thought they were pertinent in reviewing these policies and providing recommended modifications, and understanding that the district supports and encourages personal and academic freedom in line with federal and state law, state standards, and board policy. We also looked to the Civil Rights and Equity Guide, which has been in place for a few years now. That states that personnel are able to bring in some personal items and reemphasizes that their classrooms and offices should be viewpoint neutral as to prevent any unintentional violations of law or policy. We will now delve into each of the policies that are proposed with the modifications. The first one is current policy 100, which are definitions. Reviewing our current policies, we noted that there was a definition for workplace in the collective bargaining agreement, but not in our policy. We wanted to ensure that our policies were in conformity with other legal instruments that dictate how the district provides services. So we updated this policy to include a definition for workplace and workspace. And it states, workplace and workspace are defined as the site for the performance of work done in connection with the duties of an employee of the board. The term includes any place where the work of the school district is performed, including a building or other school premises such as a classroom. Any school-owned vehicle or other vehicle approved or other school-approved vehicle used to transport students to and from school or school activities, and off-school property during any school-sponsored or school-approved activity, event, or function, such as a field trip, workshop, or athletic event. Workplace and workspace also includes all property belonging to the board to help facilitate the duties of the employee. The workplace and workspace does not include duty-free time at conventions or workshop when students are not present. The second policy that has the most modifications that are being proposed for the board to review today is political activities. And political activities is straight from Florida statute 104.31, 106.113, and 110.233. And while reviewing the policies with the board's guidance to clarify viewpoint neutrality, we also look to address case law and the proposed amendments, as well as provisions in our current practices under instruments like our Civil Rights and Equity Guide and the Collective Bargaining Agreement. It's important that this policy is in place because, as I said, it is from state statute, and so there are prohibitions that the statute requires. As we get close to campaigning season and political season, this legal department regularly sends out reminders to staff what these policies and statutes state to ensure that all of our staff are following state statute regarding their political activities while they're serving as an employee of the school district and not in their off-duty time. The proposed amendments to this policy were meant to clarify some of those distinctions between what is political activity and what are acceptable practices for staff while providing state-approved curriculum. And it states, the board recognizes the right of an employee, student, or member of the board to assume their full responsibilities as citizens living in a democracy, including such citizen rights as voting, discussing the social, political, and economic issues of the day in public meetings, supporting candidates, accepting appointive or elective public office, or holding office in political parties. Administrative staff's citizenship right to exercise or support their political preference on their own time and away from school premises shall not be impeded, providing such activities do not violate any local, state, or federal ordinance or law. Further, administrative staff shall exercise reasonable care to show that they are acting in the capacity of a private citizen when exercising said rights. As such, administrative staff shall not conduct political and social action activities on any district facility during normal operating hours. Pursuant to state law, administrative staff members who are employed by the school board shall not participate in any political campaign for an elective office while on duty. It is the intent of the board that employees shall have academic freedom within the outlines of course content in the curriculum pursuant to state standards adopted by the board and in compliance with law. Notwithstanding, classrooms shall be viewpoint neutral, except as otherwise provided by the approved curriculum, law, and board policy. Nothing in this policy shall prevent, 1, the discussion and study of political, social, and moral issues when such discussion and study are appropriate to the subject matter of a course that meet the state standards and abide by law. Said discussion and study shall also abide by the board policy 2240 controversial issues. 2, the dissemination of information concerning school tax and/or bond elections insofar as authorized by law and policy. 3, the conducting of student elections and campaigning connected therewith. As stated earlier, the intent of the amendment is really to clarify for staff that the statute primarily looks to on-duty time as a staff member of a school district, which is a governmental entity, and to further clarify that staff are able to participate in their civic duty and privileges when off-duty. Lastly, it was meant to clarify that specific political activities such as advocating or coercing individuals to vote for a specific issue or candidate is prohibited under the law, but that there is still academic freedom to discuss political topics in compliance with the law through state standards and approved curriculum. And you will note that this theme is throughout the proposed modifications to the next policy that Kathy will go over, as well as the addition of the controversial issues policy.
Thank you, Corey. The next policy that we'll be looking at today is the use of employees' personal property, 1281, 3281, and 4281. This policy has been in place for a while and was part of our Neola conversion. The policy always had an expectation regarding the use of personal property. Note that the prior language stated that staff members may wish to bring personal property to the school either for reasons associated with professional responsibilities or for use during off-duty time. The policy now adds language from the Civil Rights and Equity Guide that states employees shall not display in plain view or in line of sight of students personal items that are not part of an approved curriculum or in accordance with board policy that reflects politics, religion, social movements, and/or personal ethics. A small personal item such as a 5x7 frame family picture is acceptable. The display of any items in workplaces and workspaces may be considered district speech and may be regulated in accordance with this policy. The intention of adding approved curriculum or in accordance of board policy is to link this policy back to both the political activities policy and the controversial issues policies, allowing these discussions in the classroom as allowed by law, state standards, and board policy. This policy aligns with case law and Florida Admin Code 6A-10.081, which is the Principles of Professional Code of Conduct for the Education Profession, that states that a teacher shall take reasonable precautions to distinguish between personal views and those of any educational institution or organization with which the individual is affiliated. We will provide additional information on district speech later in the presentation. Next, we will look at controversial issues policy 2240. As we are discussing district speech and the desire of the board for viewpoint neutrality, it is very important to understand that the board is not curtailing the discussion of important topics related to politics, religion, and social movements. Indeed, the first part of the policy states, the school board believes that the consideration of controversial issues has a legitimate place in the instructional program of schools. Properly introduced and conducted, the consideration of such issues can help students learn to identify important issues, explore fully and fairly all sides of an issue, weigh carefully the values and factors involved, and develop techniques for formulating and evaluating positions. For purposes of this policy, a controversial issue is a topic on which opposing points of view have been promulgated by responsible opinion or are likely to arouse both support and opposition in the community. The board will permit the introduction and proper educational use of controversial issues provided that their use in the instruction program is A, introduced in compliance with state standards, laws, and board policies. B, is related to the instructional goals of the course of study and level of maturity for the students. C, does not tend to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view. Or D, encourages open-mindedness and is conducted in a spirit of scholarly inquiry. Further, the policy states, controversial issues related to the program may be initiated by students themselves, provided they are presented in the ordinary course of classroom instruction and it is not substantially disruptive to the educational setting. Controversial issues may not be initiated by a source outside of the school system unless prior approval has been given by the principal. I'll pause here to say that the above language is important due to the fact that we have various laws in place that limit what and how certain topics can be taught in Florida schools. These laws are also noted in the Code of Principles of Professional Code of Conduct for Education Professions and can impact a teacher's certification or licensure. Thus, this policy provides guidance and ensures compliance for the protection of our teachers. The next paragraph is important due to the Parents' Bill of Rights. The board recognizes that a course of study or certain instructional materials may contain content and/or activities that some parents find objectionable. If after careful personal review of the program, lessons, and/or materials, a parent indicates to the school that either the content or activities conflict with his or her religious beliefs or value system, the school will consider a written request for his or her child to be excused from a particular class for specified reasons. The student, however, will not be excused from participating in the course and will be provided alternate learning activities during times of such parent-requested absences. District speech. I will tell you that I drew the short straw on this topic and will address district speech in applicable cases as that is really a creature of case law. We realize that case law can be heavy and not easy to understand, but it is important to recognize and go through some of these cases as they are part of the legal analysis regarding the legal sufficiency of the policies. As we know, the United States Supreme Court is the highest court of the land. In addition, there are 13 federal circuit court of appeals which are directly under the Supreme Court. Most cases are not heard by the Supreme Court, but rather are resolved in the applicable Circuit Court of Appeals. We are in the 11th Circuit, which includes Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. So district speech, what is it? Where does it come from? And what does the law say about it? Also, as an individual, how does it impact my First Amendment right to freedom of expression and freedom of speech? I quote, "In addition to being private citizens, teachers and coaches are also government employees, paid in part to speak on the government's behalf and convey its intended messages, unquote. Kennedy versus Bremerton from the United States Supreme Court in 2022. Therefore, district speech is government speech made by an employee of the school district when they are on duty and promulgating their professional responsibilities. The next question is, how does district speech impact my First Amendment rights as a private citizen? This is the million-dollar question with significant guidance from the courts. There are 3 United States Supreme Court cases that we will touch upon today. By no means are these all of the cases that may be applicable, but they will provide the basic foundation on this topic. We will start with Tinker. Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community Schools is the United States Supreme Court where the ruling was issued in 1969. It is a very important landmark decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. This case involved 5 students in Des Moines, Iowa, who decided to wear black armbands with a peace sign to school in protest of the Vietnam War. The principals of the Des Moines schools learned of the plan and met before the incident to create a policy that stated that school children wearing an armband will be asked to remove it immediately or risk being suspended. So the students decided to test the waters, and some were suspended. In its landmark decision, the United States Supreme Court recognized the First Amendment rights of students in public schools. The Tinker legal test, also known as the substantial disruption test, is used to determine whether a school's interest to prevent disruption infringes upon a student's First Amendment rights. In addition, it offered a very famous quote, which I hear all of the time. The court said, quote, "It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate," unquote. Tinker, however, is not the main case that addresses First Amendment rights for staff. A year before Tinker, the United States Supreme Court issued a ruling in a case called Pickering versus the Board of Education in 1968. This case involved a teacher who was dismissed after writing a letter to a local newspaper criticizing how the school board and superintendent had handled past proposals to raise new revenue. Justice Thurgood Marshall, writing for the majority, observed that in public employee cases, one must, quote, "arrive at a balance between the interests of the teacher as a citizen and commenting upon matters of public concern and the interests of the state as an employer and promoting the efficiency of the public services it performs through its employees," unquote. This is often referred to as the Pickering balancing test. This legal test has withstood the test of time and is part of the analysis when addressing public employees' First Amendment rights versus the interests of the state. Another important United States Supreme Court decision was issued in 2006 in Garcetti versus Ceballos. The plaintiff in that case was a district attorney who claimed that he had been passed up for a promotion for criticizing the legitimacy of a warrant. The court ruled that because his statements were made pursuant to his position as a public employee rather than as a private citizen, his speech had no First Amendment protection. Put another way, speech that owes its existence to a public employee's professional responsibility does not implicate the employee's rights under the First Amendment. Sweet versus Town of Bargersville. Now, moving to our Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, we will look at some of those cases to begin with our circuit, which is the 11th Circuit. Bishop versus Aronoff was issued in 1991. Bishop was a physiology professor at the University of Alabama. The professor would infuse his personal beliefs while teaching physiology and also offered an additional class for a deeper understanding of his beliefs. The professor was asked by the university to separate his personal beliefs from his professional beliefs, and that he not impart his personal belief during instructional time. This is the 11th Circuit. It's our circuit. It is precedent. It is interesting to note that the case, in that case, the 11th Circuit said, I quote, "While Tinker deals with in-class conduct and reiterates the belief that such conduct cannot be entirely unfettered, the case involves students, not teachers. We do not believe that the material and substantial interference test that's applied to student expression can control this case." That's really important because it is a distinction in the 11th Circuit. The court further said a teacher's speech can be taken as direct and deliberate representation of the school. Hence, where the in-class speech of a teacher is concerned, the school has an interest not only in preventing interference with the day-to-day operations of the classroom, such as Tinker, but also in scrutinizing the expressions that the public might reasonably perceive to bear its imprimatur, meaning its approval. As a place of schooling with a teaching mission, the court recognized the university's authority to reasonably control the content of its curriculum, especially during class time. However, the court took it a step further and said, tangential to the authority over its curriculum, there lies some authority over the conduct of its teachers that significantly bears appearance of endorsement by the university. Meaning that in addition to the curriculum being able to be controlled by the university, certain statements made by the teacher, if it could be linked back to the university, is also can be controlled by the school district or the university. The court ruled that in the present case, and in other school cases raising similar First Amendment challenges, these principles translate into a degree of deference to school officials who seek to reasonably regulate speech and campus activities in furtherance of the school's educational mission. It is important to note when you're looking at these cases that this was a university case in the 11th Circuit, and university cases normally have a little bit more latitude than you'll find in terms of academic freedom than you'll find in the K through 12 educational system. Next, we're going to look at Lee versus York, which is a case from Virginia, came out in 2007. Virginia is the 4th Circuit. This teacher taught Spanish. Lee taught Spanish at a high school in Virginia and was an employee of the school board when an employee of the school board received a complaint from a private citizen who expressed concern over certain materials that were posted in Lee's bulletin boards in his classroom. After receiving the complaint, the school board asked the principal to go and investigate. The principal proceeded to Lee's classroom. Lee was absent that day. However, the principal examined the materials posted on the board, and he discovered that some of the items, in his view, should not have been posted in a compulsory classroom setting. And so he removed them. The principal placed the items on Lee's desk in the teacher lounge and left a note explaining. Lee filed suit based on a violation of his First Amendment. And addressing the matter, unlike our circuit, the 11th Circuit, the 4th Circuit acknowledged that teachers do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate, like Tinker. However, it further stated that certain limitations are placed on the free speech rights of school teachers due to the nature of their employment by government-operated schools. In its review, the court applied the Supreme Court's Pickering-Connick test and determined that public schools possess the right to regulate speech that occurs within a compulsory classroom setting, and that a school board's ability in this regard exceeds the permissible regulation of speech, even than what other governmental workplaces may have. In addition, even though the items were not part of the curriculum, they were not taught, the court found that Lee's speech was curricular in nature. The court found that it plainly constituted school-sponsored speech, bearing the imprimatur of the school, as students were constantly present and would see the items in a compulsory classroom setting. Furthermore, the court noted that they were not posted on a private bulletin board that was owned by Lee, but on the school-owned bulletin board in the classroom. In those circumstances, the court said, it would be reasonable for students and parents alike to perceive that the materials posted on the classroom bulletin boards were closely connected to the school or had been approved by its administrators, and thus the school's interest outweighed Lee's First Amendment rights. Johnson v. Poway Unified School District is a case from the Ninth Circuit, which was issued in 2011. 11th Circuit has a reputation of being pretty conservative. The Ninth Circuit has a reputation of being a little bit liberal. It's the California Circuit. In 2006, a teacher questioned a principal about two very large banners prominently displayed in a math classroom. One had red, white, and blue stripes and stated in large block letters, "In God we trust, one nation under God, God bless America, and God shed his grace on thee." The other banner said, "All men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator," with Creator in big block letters. These words come from patriotic songs, the pledge, and other government documents. But there was concern about the size of the banner and the emphasis on God. The principal discussed the concern with the teacher and asked that the banner be made smaller and utilize the full text, which he refused. So he was then asked to take it down, and he complied, but then filed his First Amendment lawsuit. Tinker, unlike the 11th Circuit, was again acknowledged, and it was the teacher's main legal argument. However, the court applied the Pickering-based analysis. The court said that this was speech in the classroom, and the teacher did not act as a private citizen when he went to school and taught class, took attendance, supervised students, or regulated their comings and goings. He acted as a teacher, a government employee. The court held that the First Amendment did not protect a teacher's classroom displays because they constituted a speech on a matter of public concern. Decorating a classroom was speech as part of the teacher's official responsibilities, not speech in his private capacity. Finally, Mayer versus Monroe County is a case from Indiana, 7th Circuit, and this order was issued in 2007. A teacher brought forward an action against the school district alleging retaliation for her taking a political stance in violation of the First Amendment. Mayer was told that she could teach the controversy about the policy toward the Iraq War, drawing out arguments from all perspectives as long as she kept her opinions to herself. However, in class, she shared that she passed a demonstration against military operations in Iraq and saw a placard saying, "Honk for peace." So she honked her car's horn to show support for the demonstrators. Parents complained, and the school's principal told all teachers not to take sides in any political controversy. Mayer believes that this incident led the school system to dismiss her. Like Lee and Johnson, the court found that education is compulsory, and children must attend public schools unless the parents are able to provide an alternative, such as private school or homeschool. The court further found that the First Amendment did not entitle teachers to present personal views to captivating audiences against the instructions of elected officials. The First Amendment does not entitle primary and secondary teachers, when conducting the education of captive audiences, to cover topics or advocate viewpoints that depart from the curriculum adopted by the school system. In addition to the cases we discussed today, there are other cases that are often cited. For example, Hazelwood versus Kohlmeyer, which is a United States Supreme Court, which talks about student-sponsored newspapers and what the district can and can't control with regards to that, as well as Connick versus Myers, which is another U.S. Supreme Court, which adds time, manner, and place to the Pickering analysis. Again, this was not an exhaustive presentation. but it does provide the legal landscape. I would need an entire, either a semester or a whole year to really go through First Amendment rights in the public education school setting. Attorney Huffman and I hope that this presentation provides some explanation as to the legal sufficiency of the policies and that the board is considering. We look forward to the board's discussion and comments.
Board members, do you have any comments or questions? Mrs. Patrica?
Super quickly, what was the name of that last case after Lee? I'm sorry, after Johnson?
Mayor versus Monroe County Community School Court.
My comments will come later. I just wanted that for my...
Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Persons?
Yeah, I think these policies are not only legal, I think they're needed. When I ran for my campaign and almost everybody else I've talked to said we need to get back to basics in education. So I thought back to when I went to school. We never had any displays that were controversial or political. I had no idea if any of my teachers were a Republican or a Democrat or independent, if they were voting for George Wallace or whoever was running at the time. And I believe right now, I actually went and looked at several classrooms. I could not find one classroom that had anything that would be objectionable, you know, in my grandson's school. That's the only one I went to, so it's not an exhaustive look. But I would guess, because every time something is objectionable, it comes before this board, and there's been less than a handful. So if you think of 6,000 teachers and less than a handful out there that have been brought to my attention anyway, that's probably, I could easily say 99.99% of our teachers are in compliance with these policies. And so I'm just I think it's a good policy, that's all.
Any other board comments? Mrs. Patrica?
I have comments about the three that I'm going to pull tonight, but they are separate and apart from the conversation we're having right now, so I'll get to those later. My concern is providing the superintendent with the appropriate guidance in terms of processes. So I agree with you, Mr. Persons, but I also know as a teacher, and granted I've never taught K-12, but I've taught post-secondary. As a teacher, sometimes you need to take a side in order for the class to get both sides, right? So if I'm in a classroom and I'm teaching about, what did I used to teach? I can't even think of some legal topic, and the class is on one side of the issue. That is all they're talking about. That's all they're discussing. They're in complete agreement. It is my responsibility to bring up the other side. And sometimes I pretend to believe things that I don't really believe. Like I remember moderating a debate in one of my classes when Bush was running against Gore. I was in upstate New York and everybody loved Gore. I had to come out in favor of Bush. Otherwise, there would have been no discussion about why Bush was a good candidate. Does that mean that I was indoctrinating my class? No, that means I was providing a robust classroom environment where an issue could be discussed thoroughly. So I get concerned for the superintendent when we have these policies in place that really put some rules out there that don't allow teachers to have any discretion and don't allow teachers to take the temperature of the class that's in front of them and to really exercise their professionalism in determining whether a side of an issue is being ignored. Am I making sense? Mm-hmm. That's my comment for now.
Mr. Persons?
I think you would have been perfectly within the policy because that was part of the curriculum. We say that controversial subjects conversation is allowed if it is part of the curriculum, and yours obviously was. You were just bringing out both sides. So I don't think this restricts any teacher in that aspect as long as they're using it for a curriculum. Now if you had a kindergarten class or something that had nothing to do with either of those, I think that would not be as part of the curriculum, and it shouldn't be taught. I mean, you should be bringing up subjects like that. So that's just my opinion on that. I think, again, I think it's good policy.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. And I was actually agree with Mr. Persons on that. I don't see how that would be restricting anyone's discussion based on these current policies. I mean, teachers, as we know, especially within, certain high school subjects now have those debates. I don't think anyone is trying to stop that. At least I would hope not. So, and I don't see how that policy, I mean, we're talking about personal property. We're talking about something separate of that. And I mean, really, these policies are already the guidelines that we're following per the equity guide anyway. So, I mean, it's really nothing much different with that. So that's my take on it.
Mrs. Fisher? Miss Fisher. Miss Fisher's not here, but Miss Morgan is.
So essentially, and this is what I learned in our one-to-one, essentially, public sector employees have no First Amendment rights in the workplace. Why don't we just say that? And why don't we just quote the cases that make that law effectively? And then the second part of that is state laws determine what neutrality is by spelling out what is personal politics, religion, social movements, and ethics. And quote those policies, laws. And forget about all, I mean, basically that's the bottom line. That's what you're saying. There are no First Amendment rights for teachers in the classroom, and the state has determined what neutral is based on the Woke Act, the anti-gay parents' rights, etc. My concern is that I don't know how the superintendent can enforce this. There is going to be disparate treatment, and the disparate treatment is going to create risk for principals and risk for staff, because nobody will know what's neutral. A principal, is a principal expected to walk, is every principal expected to walk every classroom and look for something that they think is neutral, or is every principal supposed to respond to a criticism raised by another staff member or a student and then look at the issue? Is a principal in one high school going to see something on a teacher's desk and say, that's unacceptable, and there's a principal in another school going to say, that's not a statement, that's not a personal point of view. How does the superintendent direct principals to enforce this, to effectuate this policy? I just, well, those are my thoughts for now. Thank you.
Mrs. Patrica?
So I'm looking at 2240, C, does not tend to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view. Sometimes it's my job as a teacher to present the other side. And if I'm presenting the other side, I could be accused of indoctrinating or persuading students to a particular point of view. So I hear the dismissal from some of my colleagues that would never be an issue, but it is literally written in the policy. So, we're talking about Bush and Gore, and everybody loves Gore, and Jack goes home and says, you know what, I really like Bush, but my teacher wouldn't let me talk about that. Or it was obvious that my teacher really loved Gore too because she never talked about Bush. Or I talk about Bush and then that's the only thing I talk about because that side has not been presented by students, and Jack goes home and complains to his mom, well, she tried to get us to vote for Bush. Like, how do I win as a teacher? And the Bush-Gore thing is a stupid example, but you get the point. How do I do my job as a teacher and really instill critical thinking skills if I can't indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view when sometimes there's only one point of view being discussed in a classroom? It's my job to make sure both sides are viewed. So I fear this is confusing for teachers, and I don't know, perhaps through the chair we could ask the superintendent, do you know how to implement this?
I think when it comes to curriculum issues, having discussions with my deputy superintendent related to the potential of this policy passing, I can tell you in an 11th grade U.S. history classroom or in a 9th grade Algebra 1 classroom what's curriculum related and what's not. The question becomes, and Mr. Persons, you said it, so I'm going to ask you directly. You walk classrooms and you said, you know, the ones you got a chance to go into, and it's not a full study of all the classrooms, but you found nothing that was objectionable. I'm wondering what you were looking for. And I'm not asking you to answer the question. I'm just asking you to understand from my point of view, how do I direct 118 principals as to what to look for? That's the translation that's going to be critical in making sure that as superintendent, I have a responsibility to enforce your policies. You pass this, I'll enforce it. I just want to make sure it's done fairly and that it's not arbitrary or capricious, to use great legal terms. Thank you for nodding your head. Because I think if all 7 of us walked a classroom with me, we might see very different things. How on Friday, when I have my principals together, what I'm struggling with is how on Friday do I direct them what to be looking for and what's acceptable and what's not, with only viewpoint neutral. I have a poster in my office that says, I'm not going to be judged based upon the value of my paycheck and other things, but that I made children a priority. That's a message, that I put children first. I believe that aligns with our values, mission, and vision. So as a superintendent, I'm okay with that poster hanging. I'm not sure with this wide open piece that we're not. Michael Jordan's photograph of Just Do It doesn't belong in any classroom except maybe a PE coach's area in a locker room. Do we take down Michael Jordan's photograph or LeBron James' photograph, who has a message about character or has a message about other things? I think we can work this out, but I need more of a dialogue between us so that I can better understand what you want me to be looking for. I'll build the procedure based upon your visions, but I need a little bit more of what's in all of your heads out for us. Thank you, Mr. Persons. Thank you for letting me ask you that question.
I'll go to, yes, go ahead, Mr. Persons. Says Ms. Giovanelli has a question.
I think we sort of spell it out. Can we pull up the policy again where it says political, social, I mean, when I was looking to say, okay, were there any flags, for instance, for any kind of gender identity? I did not see any. Were there any signs or flags that said I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat? Were there any MAGA signs or were there any Biden-Harris signs type thing? Were there any Black Lives flags, or were there any Confederate flags? Those kind of things, because those, to me, are social and different issues, and it says that in there. Trying to say, oh yeah, board policy that reflects politics, religion, social movements, and or personal ethics. So I'm not sure about the personal ethics. That's a little.
Which policy, please?
That's 1281, 3281, and 4281, what we added to it. Okay. But I'm really are thinking politics, religion, social movements, and personal ethics. So if I could ask the attorney her definition of personal ethics.
This also goes towards everybody's value system is really what it's talking about. So a reflection of whatever my personal value system is what personal ethics would be. versus professional ethics?
Okay, well, would that be to the superintendent's thing, that he's putting children first, that's his value, or ethics, or, I don't, I mean, if there's anything vague in there, to me, that's the vague issue. So that's the one that could get us into trouble. So that's all I basically have to say there, because I don't even know a good example of personal ethics, other than,
Intertwined with religion, morality, values. That's really what it's referencing, but if board directs me to take it out, we'll take it out.
Mr. Persons, I'm going to move to Ms.
Yes, that's fine,
Giovanelli.
that's
Okay. Ms. Giovanelli?
So for me, I think it's pretty simple. I think this is a guidance for good judgment, and it's about making a good judgment. And when in doubt, leave it out. I feel like that I would think that if you had the Ten Commandments or the Lord's Prayer up on the wall, somebody would take offense to that. It might be one's religion, but on another person's might be offensive. So that would be something that should not be up there, because and actually praying for somebody is actually good, but not everybody thinks that way. So I think it's just being respectful, good judgment. And if you do have a question, why not say, hey, Mr. Principal, here's what I was thinking about putting in my classroom. What do you think? Am I going to violate policy? And I mean, I don't think it's that hard. And that just becomes, it's being held accountable and not necessarily micromanaging, but I think people making good judgments, and if they really have to question it, then when in doubt, leave it out. I think it's that simple for me. I think the policies, we have to have some, because obviously not everybody has the same judgment. And that is going to have to, it may come back up here to us. And if that, so be it. That's what we're here for. So it's part of our job, and, I'll be the first to, let's do our job. It's what we're elected to do, to help run the district oversight, and this is that. Thank you.
Ms. Jordan?
Thank you, and I apologize, I had to step out a second. So I'm not sure which policy that we're on, but just if I may, doing our job, we are doing our job. I sat here and I heard two of our members say everybody's following the guides, the teachers are in compliance. So if they're following the guides and teachers are all in compliance, there has not been any new laws that have come out that we have to now come out and do new policies, because we've already done that. And right now, I'm wearing the Blessed Mother. I don't know if that's going to offend anybody. I was going to wear my mother's cross today. I looked for a rainbow lanyard. I didn't have all those things, but I do that for me. And then when I just heard about personal ethics, that refers to a person's identities, what they identify with in respects to people and situations that they deal with in everyday life. And even the controversial issues, which I have a hard time saying that, so excuse me on that, that is very subjective. I mean, we all, as Dr. B said, we can all walk into a classroom, or we can walk down the street, walk out in the hallway, we're going to see things in a different lens from everyone. And so I don't want to be that person to have policies just to say that we have policies. We have policies that are in place right now that we use, and we have been using those. I don't see how Dr. B is going to be able to instruct his principals to police, because we don't even know what the heck they're policing. And, so we have to give them this guideline, go in and try to see if this is taking place or that's taking place. Neutral views, as long as we're showing both sides, that's being neutral. If Ms. Patrika is speaking about one thing and showing one side, and you're showing both sides, and I know that the school's papers are required to do that, to show both views, so that way it's neutral and it's not one-sided, that's what it's about. It's about being inclusive to everyone. So I don't know why we're just coming and creating things that we already have in place. And I know that I had mentioned this with the equity guide, and I know that Ms. Dupree-Bruno said that she would have to update that, but you know, we're saying that personal items in the equity guide is different than the personal items that we have on our 1281s. Coffee cups are in there, but coffee cups are out. We can't have coffee cups in here, so now we have to take coffee cups out of everything. And I just, you know, it's, to me, this is a lot, and I still am having a hard time understanding this, and here I am, or we are, trying to make decisions for how many teachers and how many people in the district. That's all I have to say at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. A couple things. Ms. Patrico, you had referenced a different policy. That's why I was in regards to our discussion. So, and also, I mean, there is a difference between K through 12 and post-secondary when you're having discussions. I mean, we've been there with that. So it's a little bit different also with, I mean, you know, ones that are adults versus mostly that are not. So there are different constitutional standards we know for that. In regards to some of the other things up here, I'm treating it, I look policy-wise, is it related to the education of our children, the curriculum? I treat it like the acknowledgement. So neutral, I don't, legally neutral is not showing both sides like that. It's staying out of it, stay in the middle. So, I mean, I'm not trying to overcomplicate this, but I mean, that's the fairest way I see it. Is it related to our curriculum? Is it related to the education of our children? So outside of that, I don't think it belongs. So I think that's the fairest way to look at it. But so, and we're also not talking about, you know, what's on our person as well, Ms. Jordan. I know that was brought up in some of the one-on-ones, but that is not being addressed as part of this policy. So thank you.
Ms. Patrica, and then I just want to note it's 4:30. We still have public comment to get through.
Okay, so I don't, I think that I confused you because 4281, 3281, and 2081 or 2281, I wanted to discuss separately. So that was why I referenced those. What I was really talking about was the controversial issues. So it feels like if we look at slide 5, collective bargaining agreement, Article 2, essentially each employee has a right to exercise support or political preference, and it's the intent of the district that teachers shall have academic freedom as long as both of those things don't cause a distraction. Is that a fair assessment through the board chair to the attorneys present?
As long as, you're saying academic freedom, as long as there's no disruption, is that what you're saying, Ms. Patel?
Right, no disruption, no distraction, as long as...
That's not, so I would say that the language from the collective bargaining agreement says academic freedom within the outlines of the course content and the curriculum that's been adopted by the board.
Understood. No, I hear that, but I thought that in our one-on-one discussion, there was talk about the fact that if something causes a distraction, it is no longer permitted under the law or under our policies.
So when you're looking at First Amendment rights, one of the things that the court, in looking at that Pickering balancing task, where as a citizen, I am a private citizen, I'm going to speak on a matter of public concern versus the state's legitimate interest, one of the things they're going to look at is whatever is happening, the disruption affecting the operation of the school. So yes, you're absolutely correct. That is something that would be considered when you're doing that analysis.
So essentially, I think what happened was we had a flag hanging in a school that was considered political by some parts of the community or some people in the community, and that was brought to our attention. And now, in my opinion, we're responding with a political policy. Like it's a political response to a political issue, instead of looking at what we've been doing all along, which is taking things on a case-by-case basis. And empowering the superintendent and the professionals that work for us to determine whether all of the things that we have in place are being followed. You said it, Mr. Persons, this is just not an issue. This is just not an issue. It's an issue because it was a distraction based on one thing in one classroom in a massive district. But we're sitting here spending all this time talking about it when we could be talking about academic outcomes and, you know, how to improve classroom environments for teachers and work environments for employees, and instead we're talking about this. So that's it. I will be quiet until we're ready to move on to 4281, 3281, and 1281, because I do have real issues with the wording of those policies.
So I do want to just add one thing, Ms. Patrica, on behalf of the board. So the board cannot make a decision based on one particular flag or banner that was in a classroom. The board has to be non-discriminatory when it is applying its policies. It has to be viewpoint neutral when it's applying its policies, and it would have to ensure that any application of policies is not based on one particular characteristic. So I just want to make sure that the public understands that when we're looking at these policies, it's not to target or try to get one particular group or anything like that. This would be something that would be applied across the board in a neutral manner.
Agreed, but the introduction of this policy was born out of the existence of a flag in a classroom in our district. So that's my point. My point isn't about how it's applied. My point isn't about being discriminatory. My point is, where did this policy come from? It came from that.
Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, so I guess that's my question. So what was wrong with our policy? Why was all of this done?
In December, the board requested that a policy be drafted or a policy be amended to address classroom viewpoint neutrality.
And that came out of an incident. And I absolutely understand now what Ms. Patrica is saying. That incident could have been handled without any amendments to the policy, because the policies as were in place were appropriate in terms of managing the situation. I just don't, I have to agree. Well, let me go back and say, all of these policies we had, oh no, we didn't have the political activities policy, but that's not really the one we're talking about. We had these policies in place. Why are we amending them? The board may have wanted something that was viewpoint neutral. Was it not viewpoint neutral before?
Well, there was the Civil Rights and Equity Guide that required viewpoint neutrality, but again, the board directed that policies be reviewed for either creating or amending a policy for viewpoint neutrality.
Okay, well, my vote would be that we simply go with what we had, but because I don't think the amendments are something that the superintendent can create best practices for with respect to oversight by his school leadership. I just don't see how. I mean, viewpoint neutral. Okay, those are my comments for now.
Mr. Persons, then Ms. Giovanelli.
Yeah, I sort of brought this forward because it's a statewide issue. There were bills being brought up in the state, and there were examples from all over the school districts within Florida. There's been everything from what we had here to gay flag, pride flags in certain rooms, or trans flags, or I don't know, stickers, all sorts of things that were brought up. And it was not just in school districts, it was in all sorts of government buildings, and they wanted them to remain neutral. It was basically the flag bill, and it basically said the only inclusive flags are the United States flag and the Florida flag that should be in any of these rooms. So whenever you put all these other things up, it just sort of separates people into groups. This is the way it is, and that's why this is being done, not only here, but in other districts. So it's not because of one instance here that was brought forward. Yes, obviously, we had a huge meeting last time, and our policy, because it was not clear, I mean, because all we're doing is clarifying what political activity is, and nothing was being done. So I think there's a need for not only here, but in other districts. That's all.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So I will give you all examples because it's not just the flag that was done in December. I have brought several things to the superintendent's attention, this particular superintendent, so there would be his short tenure of a year and a half. One school, a math teacher, algebra to be exact, at a school, had the students watch a police brutality video that I had a parent contact me. They sent me the video that they were asked to watch, and said next month there would be another video. So there was 2 videos that were attempted to do for students to watch. Another one was the Equity Guide poster. This would have been maybe prior to this superintendent, was the Equality Florida poster. After it was supposed to be taken down, I went to one of my schools and it was outside, like literally the week of the school starting, it was outside on the wall, on the door, that poster that was supposed to be, should have been taken down. Then I get several calls, numerous, this has been going on, happened recently, where parents have complained to me about their student in a math class watches CNN all day, the CNN is on all day long. So what that principal, that outcome of that was the principal said you should have, give fair time for other radio, movies, other stations like Fox or whatever, you should give, equitable time. That was the outcome of that. So that is not neutrality. That really isn't. That's poor judgment. And so sometimes people need guidance. And that's exactly what I believe this is doing. Unfortunately, we all don't make, we are human, we make mistakes. And sometimes we need a little guidance. And all these teachers got guidance on this, I can assure you. And because they felt that they could do that. And I know there's more, but I can give you that these are exact examples that has happened in this district. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Morgan?
Yep, so, and that's, the point though is, Ms. Giovanelli, that the policy as we had dealt with these things that you're talking about. The fact that I was here for the Equity Florida, people were told to take it down. The fact that it didn't go down was a responsibility of the principal and the superintendent. Changing the policy doesn't make any difference at all. The policy in place dealt with the Equity Florida situation. It deals with the others. You don't need more policy to get people to make better decisions. You just need people to make good decisions with the policy we have in place. I will say in response to Mr. Persons, I don't think we have an obligation to be proactive ahead of the state legislature with respect to creating policy in the district. And then totally off topic, but I did send the board attorney an email just asking her to provide citations, because most of our policies have citations in federal law, state law, or whatever. And I think it's important that for issues like these that are so controversial, that we have some reference point back to federal or state law or court decisions or whatever. Those are my comments. I don't think we need to revise the policy. Thank you.
Board members, any other comments? Ms. Patrica?
So should I move on now to well, first of all, if I may, through the chair to Dr. Bernier, are you any clearer on what the board wants? Because that was the purpose of the discussion.
Yes, I mean, there have been some helpful comments made in the process, but I will caution us, and I'll use a different version of what Ms. Giovanelli said. What you're asking for is the application of common sense.
You can't legislate.
I will, for the first time, invoke the memory of my mother, who used to say, if common sense was more common, more people would have it. That type of application could result in one of two things. It could result in someone seeing it through a lens that might be seen by others as being overzealous, and I worry about the legal implications of somebody being told to take something down that later on is determined doesn't meet the requirement. I can also see someone being underzealous and then getting reports of items or things that are hanging in a classroom without some additional guidance. I just need the board, if you pass these policies, I need you to be aware that there will be growth, pain points in this process, and I do believe if it's just a pain point, we're fine. If it's a violation of law, then we're in a whole other situation. So that guidance from the superintendent to the staff is vital. I mean, I will, based upon the conversation, if this passes, I will do my best to develop a set of procedures. We have our principals coming in on Friday for curriculum meetings related to student achievement, but we will have to carve out time during those meetings to give them explicit direction, because upon passage of these policies, they go in effect tomorrow. So the best I can do by tomorrow is to tell all my principals that these policies have passed, put your viewing glasses on and wait for further advisement on Friday for some walks of some classrooms, and then I guess send us pictures of questionable items. I see what staff is going to be doing over the next several weeks when we're not focused on student achievement.
Right,
But if you pass these policies, I will enact them. That's my responsibility as your superintendent.
All right, so moving on to, let's use 4281 as an example, because 4281, 3281, and 1281 all have essentially the same language. The wish to was changed to only, and to me that's confusing. Because if you take that first of all, let me take a step back and say, I believe that we have tried to fit a square peg into a round hole here. I believe that the purpose of this policy was for the teacher who's teaching geography, that's maps, right? Geography, they got a map for their birthday, and now they're bringing it into class to teach from that map. That was the purpose of the use of an employee's personal property policy. That was the purpose of it. And then we had a teacher in a building who brought a flag that had some arguably objectionable material on it. And from there, we're trying to ban the use or the hanging of that material in a classroom by fitting that into a policy where it doesn't fit. So in my opinion, number one, use of employee personal property at school should be a separate policy from an employee being permitted to have personal property in their workspace. To me, those are two separate policies. Now, let's pretend we don't want to separate the policies. Let's turn to the language. Employees may only bring personal property to school either for reasons associated with classified responsibilities or for use during off-duty time. Now let's skip to the second to the last sentence. A small personal item such as a 5x7 framed family photo is acceptable. How can we have a small family photo as acceptable personal property in a classroom or in a workspace if employees are only allowed to bring personal property in for the purpose of fulfilling their classified responsibilities or for use during off-duty time? The two sentences completely contradict each other. And if we're trying to provide clarity to the superintendent and to our employees, this ain't the way to do it. I can't approve the policies based on that language alone. Those are my comments for now.
Any other board comments? Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. And in regards to what Board Member Patrica said, I understand that. That was why I asked for the coffee mug out of there. I mean, I'd be fine removing that entire line, keeping an example out of the policy, and then following that up with whatever guidance or protocol from the administration teams with legal on that. So that'd be my suggestion.
Ms. Patrica.
So if we do that, Mr. Fisher, then a frame photo is not allowed. If we do that, if we just have this policy, the way it's written, employees may only bring personal property to school either for reasons associated with classified responsibilities or for use during off-duty time. No 5x7 picture of my family is allowed in my classroom. No anything that makes my workspace personal, and frankly, I like to have some personal items in my workspace to make it feel like it's a place I want to be. We're really taking away the ability for employees to express anything about themselves as being human, you know? So I hear what you're saying, but I think that if we take out an example, we leave an example in, it's contradictory, it doesn't make sense. We take out an example, then we're really stripping employees of the ability to have personal items in their workspace.
Mr. Fisher?
So then leave it as a small personal item.
It's still contradictory, if I may, it's still contradictory. You can't say an employee may only bring personal property for those two reasons, and then say a small personal item is allowed. The two sentences contradict each other.
What are they looking at the personal item during their duty? They're teaching class.
I don't know what that means.
It says off duty. I mean, during the teaching of their class, are they looking at the item? Is that their focus?
I don't think that's what this policy says.
But based on that, how is that any different?
I don't even understand. Question?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make my comments, then if anybody has follow-up. Okay. I understand where both of you are coming from, and there have been some great, robust conversations up here. I agree with Ms. Giovanelli. That was a great statement. When in doubt, leave it out. And the examples that Ms. Giovanelli gave, I have seen similar items such as that. It's just in my first 18 months of being on the board. So obviously something tighter needs to be in place, and what we have is not suffice. My problem comes with when if we were to say, use the policy we have, why is it that, like Ms. Giovanelli stated, a poster was asked to be taken down? It hasn't been taken down. A postcard on a door has been asked to be taken down. It's not being taken down. We've asked you not to share news sources like CNN and Fox during instructional time, but yet you're still showing CNN. And so what are we doing about that? Why are we allowing it to continue in certain classrooms? That's just a question I have. As far as what the argument between a personal item such as a 5x7 frame, I do feel as though, as a former teacher, I mean, I look at our desk right here, and I think 3 or 4 of you have a 5x7 of your family in front of you, just because it's who you are and you want to remind yourself why you're up here, right? So I understand taking that out might be just like we removed the coffee item, and maybe personal, small personal items. I don't know, now small is subjective, so define small. But I do understand the the hypocrisy between employees may only bring. I don't know why we need to have I'm not an attorney, clearly. I don't know why we need to have only or wish to. I don't know why it can't just say employees may bring personal property to school either for reasons associated with classroom responsibilities or use during off time. I don't know why only or wish to necessarily needs to be in there, but like I said, I'm not an attorney. You would have better advice there.
I will say that when legal was reviewing the policy to tighten it up, that's why only was added, but I don't think there's any issues with removing only and just saying employees may.
I mean, I feel like that gives you a little bit of flexibility to have a family picture on my desk that my students aren't going to see, or I know that Ms. Giovanelli used an example of the Lord's Prayer, and maybe I have that tucked under my desk calendar for me to refer to, and it's small, but those are my comments. I do feel if we are going to use the policy, if the policy that passes tonight is the one we have currently in place, I think we need to do extreme due diligence. If the policy is not followed, there needs to be repercussions. And if that doesn't seem to be working, I feel like we need to add more verbiage in to make it just a little more specific, to possibly give Dr. Bernier and our principals a little more clarity. But Mrs. Patricky, you said something earlier about empowering our superintendent to make those decisions and his experts. So if these words are here, I do trust that he is going to use his best judgment, and the principals that he has hired at the heads of our ship are also going to use their best judgment. But having just some of these few specific wordings, I think are necessary, since the policy we have in place has not been followed, with examples that we've probably all seen. That's all I have. Any follow-up or any other board comments or questions? Mr. Superintendent.
I'm sorry, I'm not a board member comment.
Okay. Dr. Bernier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. First step, thank you for continuing to talk about this issue. I would tell you that the congruence between the first sentence and one of the middle sentences is important, and at our esteemed attorney's discretion, the removal of the word only really does help the congruency between the two sentences. And then rather than talk about small personal items, since they may bring personal property to school, if I'm reading your intent correctly in this policy as a board, whether you agree with it or not, but the intent of this policy really comes down to: employees shall not display in plain view or in the line of sight of students personal items that are not part of approved curriculum or in accordance with board policy that reflects politics, religion, social movements, and/or personal ethics. If you were then to strike a small personal item such as a 5x7, just take the examples out. If you're going to give me the latitude to utilize common sense and discretion related to things hanging in the classroom, then I think we can get there with a mix between my deputy superintendent and others, if you pass this policy. I do want to come back, though, just briefly with one sentence, that some of the items that have been mentioned about teachers watching CNN, equity guide posters, again, prior to me, CNN all day, those matters are addressed. As they arise, we address them with the principal, we address them with the teacher, and if necessary, disciplinary action is taken. What we're opening here is an opportunity potentially to expose an employee to disciplinary action based upon what's hanging in their classroom. I think the fact that you tell me it's approved curriculum and that it can't violate politics, religion, social movement, or personal ethics. Therefore, the two photographs I have of the Appalachian Trail and me hiking, that doesn't violate that. My priorities poster that just says it's not going to matter when I die where I made, what car I drove, but I made a difference in the life of a child, that aligns to district speech. We believe in putting our students first. I'm nodding towards legal, I'm looking for a nod back. You know, Michael Jordan's photograph of just do it. I know, not yet. So those are the types of questions the principals are going to ask me. So I guess I could vet that out more with our attorney over the next 24 hours before I lose her to the experts that she is one of to the Florida School Board's Attorneys Conference.
The only thing I would say is that we have to be careful, because this is case-by-case basis. In the past, even when these things have come up, it's been individually handled, analyzed, and reviewed. So you'll have the policy, but the application has to be delicately and very specifically handled and consistent across the school district.
Go ahead, Mr. Fisher.
May I ask the superintendent a question through your chair?
Yes.
Would it help if we set a future effective date 2 weeks, 30 days, something like that? Would that help with the application, or is that going to make a difference?
No, I don't think it's going to make a difference, sir. I think we always put policies into place the next day. I don't want to change that, but you do realize it's going to take me some time. I mean, I think by Monday, we can have principals walk in classrooms, but I need some time with them. I need time for them to express and vocalize, talk with us. I'm going to need some time before we can effectuate classroom walkthroughs for this type of material that are effective and aligned.
Ms. Patrica?
So I don't know how we can vote on this tonight. If we're taking the word only out, if we're taking personal item such as a 5x7 frame family picture out, and I would argue that personal ethics should be taken out as well, because as I looked up a definition of personal ethics, what did I find? I found, way at the top, integrity, loyalty, selflessness, transparency, ethical standards, respect, empathy, responsibility. How many of our classrooms have those words hanging in the classrooms? So I would argue that we have to take that out as well. And those are substantive changes to this policy. So that means they would have to go through the public notice process again. So I don't see how we vote on them tonight anyways, if we're going to take that stuff out. Those are my comments.
Ms. Jordan?
I just want to make a quick comment, just listening to Dr. Bernier speaking about, if this were to pass tomorrow or Monday, all of us will, the principals will get with them, the principals will start walking indoors. What does that look like? What does that say to our teachers? And how much time is that taken away from their job and student outcome? So now we're going to go and start looking in every single room, observing, checking to see what's hanging, what's not. And as he has already stated, that when things come up, and I know for a fact that if I've ever brought anything to Dr. Bernier, Dr. Savage, or whomever was in that place regarding a situation that was violating policy, it was taken care of. So again, I keep going back to, if we know that this is already happening, and he has heard here very clearly that, we want that tightened up, the policies that we already have in place, then why are we going through and why are we even having this conversation? I know we have to have it, and thank you.
Okay, with respect of time and our citizens that still need to make public comment and the time, are there any more comments at this time? I know that we have further discussion tonight at the board meeting for items being pulled possibly. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to public comment. Thank you, both of you. The next item is public comment. It's on.
I thought the board had agreed to make some changes, like to take out the may and to take out the personal. Did the board, was that not the direction we were leaning? That was the sense I got from the conversation, no?
So we need to decide as a board, do we want to have these words removed, changed, revised, and then brought back this evening?
No, they can't be brought back this evening. Those are substantive changes.
Right.
When you make substantive changes, you have to go through the...
Correct.
But we're still in the rulemaking process, so public hearing, second reading is this evening. If it's changing the word may, I don't think that's a major change. But what was the other change was to take out personal ethics. That's, I would see more as a significant change. And what was the other third one?
It's not changing the word may, it's removing the word only.
Oh, taking out the personal 5x7 frame, which is really just an example. It's really to the board. I think the personal ethics is the one that would cause me the most concern, that would require us to go through the full rulemaking process again of the 28 days. May and just removing an example.
It's not may.
I'm sorry, removing only, so it just says may.
That's a big change.
That one I would feel comfortable with, and the removing of the example I would feel comfortable with. But if the board wants to completely remove personal ethics, I think we would have to, I would advise that we go through the rulemaking process.
Board discussion? Yes, Mr. Persons.
If we remove that, could the first one be tonight?
If we are going to go through the rulemaking process, we have to re-advertise. So remember, the policies, the language in the policies are not advertised. It's just notice that we're going to be creating or amending these policies, and we have to do it within 28 days with the first reading and the second reading. So this has been already advertised, and as you can recall, as you're going through the policy rulemaking process, you're making changes along the way. So this policy really has not been approved or adopted yet. That's why you're going to public hearing, second reading this evening. Out of an abundance of caution, I would say if you're going to remove that section, I do think that's a little bit more of a substantive change, I would start the rulemaking process again. So that would not be tonight. We would have to re-advertise, and it would go through the full 28-day process.
May I ask quickly, the policy in place, though, stays as is until the 28 days?
So the policy that we have does not have that language. It's more in line with the liability affiliated with use of personal property, also in line with what the CBA says in terms of liability. And then the only other thing that would be still in place will be the Civil Rights and Equity Guide that already has the request or the requirement that classrooms be viewpoint neutral.
Okay. Ms. Giovanelli?
The personal ethics, that came from Neola or the law?
The personal ethics, that language is not Neola language. This is language that's based on case law. As I said in the meeting, believe it or not, I had conversations with some of my colleagues with regards to all of these policies. The controversial issues one is definitely from Neola, and many districts do have that. But this particular one was actually a conversation that I had with the general counsel in California. They had something very similar in that we had discussions about how that impacted their district and et cetera.
So I personally think that it should stay in. Because when I Googled personal ethics, I've got personal ethics refers to the ethics that a person identifies with in respect to people and situations that deal with in everyday life. That word respect is a big deal for me, because I think that we as a nation have forgot that to respect others. And whether we like what they do, we still should respect them and treat them with the same respect as we would do someone that we did like. So I would not want to take it out. The may versus only, that was in the may was in the prior one. So we've talked about that already. We're just putting it back and put into the way it was. So I don't think that is a big deal. I believe in leaving the personal ethics in there based on the law. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Patrica?
Thank you. So respect is a personal ethic. So if you leave it in there, you can't have the word respect hanging in a classroom. First of all. Second of all, the word only was added by the board attorney and the legal team between the last time we discussed this policy and this discussion of the policy. So it is not a word that we have discussed publicly until now. My final point is that I don't understand how removing the word only is not a substantive change. It completely changes the meaning of the policy. It makes it so that the first sentence and the second to the last sentence make sense together, whereas before they didn't make sense together. So I'm not clear on how that's not substantive, but I will defer to the board attorney's judgment on that. But by leaving personal ethics in there, I think it's kind of the opposite of what you were trying to accomplish, Ms. Giovanelli, unless I misunderstood your comments. That's it. I'm not going to talk anymore.
I'm going to double check, because I recall that the change was actually brought during the first reading, but let me just double check that.
In our one-on-ones, you introduced it as a change that you had made with the legal team in between meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. This is Thank you. It's from the first, it is not from the first reading, so we just double check that. It said may wish to in the first reading.
Ms. DePay Bruno, can you clear up something? Ms. Giovanelli brings up a good point about the personal ethics regarding respect, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but if it reads administrative staff members shall not display in plain view or in the line of sight of students' personal items that are not part of an approved curriculum or in accordance with borough policy that reflects politics, religion, social movements, and/or personal ethics. We're saying you cannot have that on display. Those in the list, right?
Unless it's part of the curriculum or board-approved policy. For example, the word respect, I do believe that is one of the words that comes up when we do our acknowledgments. It's one of the words from the Department of Education. So long as it's within the curriculum or it's within the policy, there's no issues with that. This personal ethics is more in lines of my personal values and my personal morals.
Okay.
The code, education code, has all kinds of other language that it uses that we will have to abide by to include the word respect, to include the word non-discrimination. I mean, there's just various things that's already in the code that this would not apply to.
Right. I was a little confused as to the definition and then what was being asked about believing in, taking out. And I do know that, you know, we have a student up here that reads a word every month, character word, and I know I've heard respect in at least one of those. So that word is okay in the classroom because even though, I mean, hopefully we all have respect as our personal ethic, but I just wanted to clear that up. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli, I was just a little confused because I knew exactly what you were saying, but I wanted to make sure that was meshed the right way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr.
No.
Okay, Ms. Jordan.
But, and I read that, I have that same definition that you had, Ms. Giovanelli. But however, it says, identifies with respect to people and situations that they deal with in everyday life. So that could be multitude of things. I mean, what I see in people's everyday lives or what my life is like, your life, I mean, we have different lives. So that could be a problem. That word could be a problem.
Dr. Bernier?
I'm going to try to help. I may not. And I may be overstepping bounds, that if I do, please, Madam Chair, tell me I'm out of order. But the debate alone currently around those two words of personal ethics tells me you need to have more conversation about what this is about. So that we can say that. Because to the point of you, I'm going to go back to your experience as a classroom teacher. We have success-rate posters everywhere. They speak to integrity, they speak to teamwork, they speak to respect, and we have to have some, the fact that there's so much debate going on reflects that it probably is best to come back, have another workshop or briefing where this can be more deeply explored. I'm just putting my 2 cents in, now I'm going to turn off my microphone and turn the other way.
Okay, board, so I think we need to decide if we want to table this or not for this evening's meeting, especially with not only confusion, but also with moving some words around that, I mean, we have to do what we have to do. So how about a thumbs up for tabling this for further discussion? Yes, Ms. Jordan?
Can we table it here at a briefing? We cannot table it here. Does that not have to be tonight at an action meeting?
So it would be board direction to pull it.
Okay.
Okay.
And then basically we pull it and take it off the agenda.
Okay.
I just want to make sure,
Okay. So we'll determine that this evening. Is that fair?
Yeah.
To move on to public comment?
Or can we pull it now?
Yeah, we can pull it. We can pull it, we just can't.
Pull it now.
Okay.
Regularly, basically you'd be giving direction to pull it this evening, so we just remove it from the agenda.
Yes. Is that what we would like to do?
You gotta do a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up if you would like to pull it. Okay, that's only 3.
3 to pull it, 3 to, I'm so sorry. So we're not pulling it?
Correct.
Basically? Okay, thank you. Do you want the only and the small personal example taken out?
Board thumbs up for only and small example to be taken out. That's 4.
Okay, and then are we, because if we're going to take out the personal ethics, it's going to go through rulemaking again. So is the direction from the board to leave that in at this point?
Do you want to leave personal ethics in at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, that's 4.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now, can we move on?
I have my direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now we will move on to the next agenda item, which is public comment, and our attorney, we're going to give her a few minutes to walk over, is going to address public comment. While Attorney DuPay Bruno is getting prepared for public comment, I just wanted to remind the board, we do have a student performance. They're already here in the hallway, ready to set up. So I just wanted to respect the time of the students as well.
I'm not sure where we are, Madam Chair. Do you want me to move forward with?
Please make your, read your script for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on this meeting's agenda. If you completed a public comment card, please provide it to the staff. Public comment will be held at the podium in the center aisle in front. Please be advised that the board will not respond during public comment to remarks made by speakers. However, at the conclusion of public comment, the chair or superintendent may respond. Speakers who fail to follow proper decorum in the chambers will be ruled out of order. Any speaker continuing with such remarks will be required to relinquish the microphone per Board Policy 0169.1 and may be removed from the chambers. There will be one warning. Per Board Policy 0169.1, the time per speaker is 3 minutes if there are 20 speakers or less. You will find the countdown on the big screens in the front of the room. Once your time has elapsed, the microphone will automatically shut off. Please state your name when you approach the microphone. I will call your names 5 speakers at a time. Please follow staff's direction when lining up. Madam Chair, there are 7 individuals who wish to address the board at this briefing.
Okay, please proceed with public comment.
Thank you. Will the following individuals please line up? Dr. Paula Porter, Dr. Madeline Stewart, Jill Pellis, Marge Cox, Michael Ondasia.
Hit the timer. Good evening, afternoon. I'm Dr. Paula Porter from Lehigh Acres. First of all, I want to thank you guys for this very lively conversation discussion. It's very important that we hear that as citizens. But I like to play devil's advocate a little bit, and there were some things in this policy that are a concern to me that could be another issue. For example, this display of personal items. Does this involve clothing? I could wear a t-shirt. Does this involve wearing jewelry like a cross or a Star of David? What about tattoos that are visible to the students and that have a personal view or maybe something that could be considered offensive? What about dyeing one's hair in rainbow colors? How far is this going to go? We already know in the state of Texas with a student that has his hairdo in ethnic styles has been kicked out of school several times. What's going to happen with this? You know, we also have the policy, how's this policy going to be policed? Will there be daily inspections to make sure you're not wearing anything offensive? What are the consequences to the teachers? And, you know, you talked about good judgment. I would throw in the concept of professional judgment, and you also talked about the possibility of what could be determined offensive. In my literature classes in college, when I was teaching Mark Twain, I would always say, how could a guy that's been dead for over 100 years possibly offend anybody today when he had no idea his stuff was going to be read for that long period of time? So having passionate teachers is vital to educating students in Lee County. We need to stop reacting to the rhetoric of indoctrination, grooming, or being woke. These words are harmful manipulations that serve only to destroy the desire and passion of a teacher who lives in fear of losing a job or their certification. More importantly, it impacts their mission to bring up a new generation that are not only critical and creative thinkers, but are productive members of society. I, for one, having taught 5th grade in the 80s in little old Council Bluffs, Iowa, am so thankful to a higher being, spirit, power, whoever he, she, it, they are, that I did not have to go through any of these things in those days. We're becoming a little bit too personalized about being offended. Thank you.
Hello, Madeline Stewart. First, I have a question, because I don't know if this is a common occurrence, but Mr. Persons told us that he was the one who suggested to Attorney Bruno, I believe this is what you said, that there were things happening across the state and that we had to get on top of this. So that's a question to you. Secondly, please, professional conduct, professional ethics, and professional judgment. Dr. Bernier has just explained to you the difficulty this kind of policy is going to create in a school. We already have teachers who are fearful. They're confused. These policies do not clarify anything. All they do is make more policy, and that's not the point of how you create a culture of learning and a culture of respect. The whole concept of we have to ferret out these offenders and punish them just flies in the face of what a school district is supposed to be about. And you say we say that we are personal, passionate, and progressive. And I am sitting here listening to this, wondering how in the world this discussion could really be described as progressive. Progressive meaning faith in the future, going forward, developing new knowledge and imparting that to students. So please, I completely agree this policy is unnecessary. And there's no law for this yet. So what you're doing is you're putting yourselves in jeopardy. We also know that the people who made the laws in Tallahassee are now turning around and saying, oh my goodness, what's going on in these school districts? They're going overboard. And what do? They blame the teachers. They blame the principals. How in the world is this going to create a world-class school system? It cannot. It will not. The legislature, those in power in Tallahassee, are not going to back you up. They're going to blame you the way they blame the principals and the teachers, and that's completely wrong. So I urge you, do not pass this policy. Do not pass any of these policies. You have them in place, and they're doing fine. And maybe what you need to do is spend more time on in-service education, but who has time for that? Because you'll be policing in the classrooms. If teachers are confused about what they are and are not allowed to do, then they need some more in-service education. They don't need a policeman. Thank you.
I'm Marge Cox. I live in Bonita Springs. I'm a retired educator. When I knew this was going to be a topic, I tried to look up, because I'm a librarian, we do research, and I found a site from the Middle Tennessee State University Free Speech Center that spoke to the Pickering, Hazelwood, and Garcetti, I hope I'm saying that right, and was very informational. I've sent it to your email, so you will have copies of it. But I thought the last paragraph, the first sentence, really spoke to what all of the pages had to say. The area of teacher free speech rights is still evolving. And I thought, yes, it is. Let it evolve. We don't have to be the forerunner of it. I appreciate so much the time you spend in your jobs and trying to make a difference for kids and trying to make us truly a world-class school system. Unfortunately, you've had to spend a lot of time on policies and other kinds of what I would consider busy work, instead of really laying open the ground for there to be the world-class school system that we want to have, to encourage teachers and students in them leading their education and being where we want them to be. I also looked up the Florida DOE Just for Teachers community and the Teachers Bill of Rights, and I could find nothing in it that said this policy needed to be approved tonight or within the next 30 days. It was like, please, you've got a policy. Maybe it needs to be enforced better, but you've got the policy in place. Let it be. Don't add more to it just so that we've got more to it. So thank you again for your work. The time you spend as board members is mind-boggling to me. And I want you to know how appreciated you are as a superintendent and as boards and as our legal representative. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Will the following individuals line up? Brian DeGrazio, Harrison Tao.
My name is Jill Pellis. I'm a resident of Fort Myers. I wouldn't be in your seat for all the money in the world. You have everybody throwing darts at you and threatening you, including our legislators. No matter what you do, you're getting the arrow. So I respect what you do, but I think that the three policies that you're talking about today are so totally restrictive, and they're targeting marginal communities. Really, that's what it's about. And I think that was brought up marginally here tonight. Even the governor has changed and made a huge about-face on his book banning message. And now he's blaming you and the teachers and the administrators for it's a hoax and you're overreacting. So my plea tonight is, or this afternoon, is to say to you, stop, take your time, don't rush into decisions. Nobody is forcing you to make a decision tonight. It's an important decision. It's a vital decision. Take the necessary time to talk it through. Don't feel pressured. Don't feel angry. Your discussion, I'm really impressed with it. It was open, it was honest, you said what you wanted. I, as a building principal for over 30 years, could hardly fit in what I was supposed to do, and now you're talking about having a principal police the classrooms and make sure everything is, that's right, and that coffee cup is okay. What if that teacher's family photo is of two fathers or two mothers, or a black mother and a white father, or whatever it is, and it doesn't meet your definition of neutral or the norm? What's going to happen then? Would I be sent home for my t-shirt today? Do we really want principals policing, or do we want principals to be instructional leaders of the building? Because that's what we're hired to do. We are hired to be instructional leaders, to make sure that there is effective, efficient, open, honest instruction based on data, based on good teaching policies. Well, I hate to use the word policies. Based on good teaching, Or do we want them to go into, and make sure that children are learning and that all children are learning at the same time, that it's not just question and answer one-on-one, that all children are actively engaged in the process of learning? Or do we want principals merely to go into different classrooms and look and see what's on the wall and look and see what's on your coffee cup? I don't think you want that. I think you want, if I were your principal, I think you would want me to make sure to maintain the highest quality of instruction that I possibly could, because my children were in school, your children are in school, and I'm hired to ensure.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up. Thank you.
Good luck.
Michael Landosha, Fort Myers, former Lee County school teacher. And I had some really well-prepared remarks, and I have discarded all of them based on what I've heard so far. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to spend 8+ hours a day in a viewpoint-neutral environment. And I can't imagine what that would be like. This room is not a viewpoint-neutral environment. I think about my former classroom. I used to have a poster of the Declaration of Independence on the wall. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The Declaration of Independence is many things. I think we can all agree on the principles of the Declaration of Independence, but it's not viewpoint neutral. If you read it, it actually defines the terms by which you should overthrow your government. It's not viewpoint neutral. So do I, as a teacher, keep that on my board, on my wall? I don't know. If I think I'm going to get in trouble and could possibly lose my job, I'm taking it down. And I was here a couple weeks ago and I was talking to you about why I left the Lee County School District and the constraints and the constraints that have been placed on me, the autocratic constraints that are placed on me as a teacher. And I told you that we can't police ourselves the way the law is expecting us to police ourselves in any reasonable way. And it looks like many of you have taken that and drawn exactly the wrong conclusion. And it looks like what you're doing with these policies is putting the policing power into the hands of our administrators. And they don't want it. They don't want your, I guarantee our principals do not want to go around the classroom and look at all of our posters and look at all of our stuff and make a determination as to whether or not all of those things are viewpoint neutral. They have better things to do with their time. They do not want to do that. And I keep getting reminded of one of my favorite books, which was Inherit the Wind, in which the main character says you cannot impartially administer a wicked law. And a wicked law will, like cholera, destroy everything it touches. And I think that a lot of you, and it's not an enviable position by any stretch of the imagination, are trying to shape policy around just bad laws. And we know they're bad laws because the people who made the laws are walking them back now. I would strongly recommend, if you want to have a policy that's going to help, I would strongly recommend a policy that says before parents can complain about anything going on in a classroom, they have to demonstrate that they have reached out to the teacher first and talked to the teacher first to see if they can resolve their problems. I've taught many controversial topics and have had to talk to many parents and have never had an occasion where a parent talked to me and did not walk away satisfied with what I was trying to do. That would be a better policy. Thank you.
Before our next speaker, just out of respect with our students that are waiting for us, is the board okay if we go to the order of comments and reports to our action meeting this evening?
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the service that you all provide and because of your care for students. I've already sent a letter to the board, which has been accepted also as a letter to the editor in the two local papers. So I'm not going to repeat in detail my views and position. I've lived in Lee County for the last 3 years, and I just retired after a 48-year career in the nonprofit, for-profit, and consulting sectors. I've served on boards of nonprofits in education and in healthcare in Philadelphia, where I lived for most of my adult life. I'm also a first-generation immigrant twice. Came to the U.S. as a 13-year-old, and for all my successes, I credit my family, my parents, and a very phenomenal public education system in New Jersey in the mid-'60s, and the library system, and places that supported teachers to teach and students to learn versus fearfully and ideologically limiting their exposure to views and ideas different from their own group. In my work life, which was all in human resources, but that special branch that is talent acquisition, finding the best people for our clients and my employers, I saw the products of our educational system and I judged them. And I can tell you that the best candidates at all levels, from entry level to C-suite that I've dealt with, are the ones that have the broadest, that are most broadly exposed to issues and views, learn critical thinking skills, and who had the intellectual curiosity to go with their book learning and their ambitions. None of these skills are developed or encouraged by limiting debate or censoring access to information. Marketplace of ideas. John Stuart Mill, but actually Oliver Wendell Holmes, who talked about it. It's one of our strongest and greatest assets. And all this fear-driven limitations of the exchange of ideas is horrible. And so this is not the first or last time that someone's going to push a policy that's counter to your mission and your objective to have a world-class school district. In the aggregate, these kinds of policies limit the opportunities of children you're supposed to be educating and preparing for the world they face. This particular policy is ill-considered in substance and in timing. We could see that in that discussion and in enforcement, and it's not necessary at this time. Thus, I urge that there be no rush to passage and that it be studied further. Lastly, I would find some of this micromanagement, I think is the word Ms. Giovanelli used, of the marketplace of ideas a bit more credible and sincere about it being to protect and educate the children if we didn't see how ideologically driven some of them are.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Parent and community member. We all have things to do. It's getting late. No one wants to be having this conversation, but unfortunately, we need to have this conversation. Anyone who sends their children to school this day and age cannot feel comfortable that they're not going to be put in some pretty awkward situations. So you have the numbers. You are doing the right thing. I wouldn't blow it out of proportion. These are really minute changes. The community wants them. If you have to tighten it up at a later date, so be it. But I think it's time to get this done. You know, anything that reiterates. I had problems in my own child's school in Pine Woods, in Estero, great school, no issue. Usually no issues. And it was an inappropriate video that was shown. It was addressed. And it was addressed, but luckily I'm on the curriculum committee. I went to one of the chiefs who then had the okay to act further, but a lot of us don't have that. Frankly, I'm pulling back from a lot of extracurricular things. I have to work just to keep up with inflation. I want to be able to trust when I send my kids to school that it's staying neutral. And we're getting a little absurd. We're talking about blatant things. You know, however you have to write that policy. When I think about it, it's blatant. It's these flags that aren't the American flag. It's pretty outspoken, just frankly inappropriate things that shouldn't be in the classroom. Where I'm from, New Jersey, we're about 20 years ahead of Florida. When I say ahead, it's in a negative way about what's happening in the classroom. And I saw the very beginnings when I was leaving high school, and. So I would say it's not easy when people are pushing back at you, particularly if it's staff, but just stay the course. It's not as big a dumpster fire. It sounds like those are pretty reasonable changes and just incremental approach that hopefully so parents can have some peace when they go to school. Certainly there's no book banning. There's no anti-gay law. That's more propaganda. That's also, some of those things are basic things, but you could call the law do things how we did them 10 years ago, and it would be a reasonable statement. And actually, I appreciate these folks, because at least they get up and act on their beliefs, we may disagree, but they're in these curriculum committee meetings, and they know we're not banning books. I think Lee County, maybe one book was taken out of commission. Most of them, the Miller test kept us from doing it, and you know, I'm not sure what else is coming out of Tallahassee, because there's certainly other books that are way too inappropriate. I'm not really approved by any stretch of the imagination, you know, but
That concludes public comment.
Dr. Bernier or Attorney Dupay-Bruno, is there anything you would like to address regarding public comment?
Just to thank people for coming out and participating in the process. Thank you for the emails and the constant communication. We're sending notes back to you, sharing that information with the board, and trying to help make the best informed decision possible.
And very briefly, Madam Chair, just to remind everybody, we still have laws. Title II addresses religion. Title VII will address race and color and national origin. Title VI as well. So these laws are still in place. And the Civil Rights and Equity Guide actually addresses wearing religious necklaces, garb, and those types of things, and dresses. So it is covered in our Civil Rights and Equity Guide. And the only thing I want to really correct very quickly is that no one can direct the board attorney. Not one board member can give direction to the board attorney. It really has to come up on the dais, and there's a discussion amongst the board members on the dais to provide both me and the superintendent direction, and that's what happened in December. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We are going to postpone good of the order and comments for this evening's action meeting. We will have a student performance tonight starting at 5:45, followed by our action meeting at 6. At this point, having no other business to come before the body and seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. The time is 5:35 p.m. Have a great afternoon.